Chapter 2267. Before this, all the demons knew that Zhi Tianxing was the greatest enemy of the demon race. This person was extremely strong. On the northern battlefield he had once slaughtered millions of demons. But just how strong was he? The demons on the Divine Mountain had never seen it with their own eyes and did not have a clear idea. After all, they had not rushed to the front lines to participate in the war. Now they finally saw it with their own eyes. Zhi Tianxing only used one sword move to command 10,000 starry sword lights to instantly kill thousands of elite demons. Not only was the torture department completely destroyed, even more than half of Baiming Palace was destroyed and turned into ruins. Such a terrifying and peerless power left everyone dumbstruck. When they came back to their senses, only endless fear and lingering fear remained in their hearts. Many people even secretly rejoiced that they had not been in the torture department so that they could live until now. Even though the demons were cold-blooded, cruel, brave, and violent. But in the end they were still intelligent creatures and they would still feel fear. After a long while, when the dust and magic power in the sky had dissipated, Zhi Tianxing's figure appeared and stood murderously in the sky. He looked coldly in the distance at the demon guards and experts near Baiming Palace. Wherever he looked, the guards and experts of the devil race subconsciously backed away. Such a scene made many demons feel deeply humiliated. Dozens of hot-blooded and fearless devils couldn't bear this silent humiliation. They shouted and dashed towards Zhi Tianxing. "Everyone, don't be afraid, let's attack together. For the glory of our race we will not retreat. No matter how strong he is only one person. We have many people, we are not afraid of him. Don't forget the great demon saint's reward. Whoever kills him will be given the position of deputy commander and 500 million in cultivation resources." More than 40 demon experts charged at Zhi Tianxing without any regard for their own safety, not forgetting to shout at the top of their lungs. But they were immediately met with tragedy. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Zhi Tianxing waved his right hand and raised the burial of heaven, sending out dozens of cold lights. More than 80 starry sword rays instantly streaked across the sky and pierced those devil experts. With a series of ping 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 muffled sounds, more than 40 demon experts were torn into pieces by the sword light on the spot. Flesh and blood swirled in the air, and the dazzling sword light interweaved to form a magnificent and shocking scene. With a single move, everyone was smashed into pieces, their bodies and souls destroyed. Seeing the fate of these demon race experts, everyone kept quiet out of fear, a chill running down their spines. Originally, there were still a few demons who were infected by their hot-bloodedness, and a strong fighting spirit ignited in their hearts. However, after witnessing the tragic deaths of these people, their hot-bloodedness and fighting spirit were instantly extinguished. Zhi Tianxing's murderous aura still hadn't dissipated. He turned into a golden shadow and rushed into the crowd, starting a massacre. "Swing your sword. Heaven-cleaving sword. Heavenly dragon palm. Broken moon sword." He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and slashed out an earth-shattering sword light. His left palm struck out an enormous dark golden dragon claw, continuously slamming into the crowd. Loud rumbling sounds erupted continuously, reverberating endlessly on the mountain peak. Dazzling spell light also illuminated the peak of the Divine Mountain. Violent shockwaves spread out in all directions, blowing up the gravel and dust on the ground. In a short 10 breaths of time the crowd was scattered in all directions. 80% of the demon race were killed on the spot, dying without an intact corpse, turning into dregs all over the ground. There weren't many survivors left and they were also scared out of their wits, fleeing in panic. In the eyes of the demon race, Zhi Tianxing, this white-clothed killing god, was more terrifying than the world's most terrifying devil. Apart from the great fiend sage and the ancestral fiend god, probably no one could stop him. But Zhi Tianxing didn't let those demon race go. Holding the sword of burial of heaven he pursued and killed. Boom. Boom boom. Bang 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 bang. Sword light bloomed unceasingly and muffled sounds rang out continuously. Batch after batch of demon race collapsed in a pool of blood, dying miserably. Zhi Tianxing went on a killing spree on the mountain peak, as if he entered a no-man's land, sweeping everything before him. About 15 minutes later he killed more than 2,000 demon race members in succession. The few hundred demon race members who were lucky enough to survive all fled in all directions, hiding in various concealed places on the divine mountain. If he pursued them one by one, it would definitely waste a lot of time. Ji Tianxing didn't want to waste time, so he gave up on the pursuit. He raised his head to look at the bloody light barrier in the sky with a radius of 150 kilometers. Heaven-splitting sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and unleashed all of his power, slashing out a 1,000-foot-long giant sword with all his might. Bam! The dark golden giant sword ruthlessly struck the bloody light barrier, exploding with an earth-shaking bang. Immediately, a huge crack was split open on the bloody light barrier. Ji Tianxing's figure flashed, passing through that crack, and flew to the sky above the wasteland. He frowned as he looked in front of him, seeing Yu, Ling Xian and the rest besieging Luo Shui and Yun Yao. Luo Shui was fighting against two opponents, but he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. He was actually able to fend off Yu and Ling Xian's attacks. Her blue dress was stained with a few streaks of blood as if she was slightly injured. However, Yu and Ling Xian were severely injured, their bodies covered in blood. Especially Ling Xian, there were at least 10 wounds on his body, all of which were so deep that his bones could be seen. His black robe had long been soaked in dark purple demon blood. However, Yun Yao was in a precarious situation. She was besieged by Ma Tuo and Debaldi, and even with the water-reverse divine sword, she was at a disadvantage. After all, she had just broken through to the martial sage realm. Ma Tuo was a rank 7 martial sage while Debaldi was a rank 2 martial sage. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing didn't hesitate to rush over and join the battle. 5-colored divine lightning. He teleported behind Debaldi and his left palm shot out a 5-colored lightning beam. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, and a dazzling cold radiance shot out. Debaldi sensed that he was about to die and his expression changed drastically. He waved a pair of large hatchets and a blood-red radiance filled the sky. Bam! With a muffled sound, the blood-red light blade blocked the 5-colored divine lightning and sparks filled the sky. Debaldi heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that he had dodged a bullet. However, in the next instant he felt a sharp pain in his chest and his expression changed. Boom! A cluster of dazzling starlight suddenly exploded in his chest, turning into a huge mushroom cloud that soared into the sky. Debaldi's sturdy body was instantly smashed into pieces, and a large amount of blood splattered out. A dazzling purple spiritual soul flew out from the broken pieces of the blood rain, and ran away in a panic. Originally he had wanted to run back to the holy mountain to heal himself. However, the peak of the holy mountain was a mess and Baiming Palace and the punishment department had been destroyed. He didn't dare to run back to the holy mountain as that would be suicide. However, even if he ran to the empty north it would be useless. Ji Tianxing teleported and caught up with Debaldi and he waved his sword. Bam! Chapter 2268. After Baldi was killed, only Ma Tuo was left. The pressure on Yun Yao was greatly reduced. She waved the reverse water divine sword and slashed out sword shadows. She was locked in a fierce battle with Ma Tuo. Ji Tianxing turned around and charged toward Ma Tuo with his sword. He joined forces with Yun Yao to deal with him. The two of them performed their ultimate sword techniques. Sword shadows covered the sky and drowned Ma Tuo's figure. Ma Tuo was instantly in a life-or-death situation. He was forced to retreat as he withstood the thousands of sword lights. Even so, he was still covered in wounds and bloody holes from the stabbing of the sword light. After a short 10 breaths, Ma Tuo was sent flying by Ji Tianxing's sword after exchanging a few blows. There was a terrifying gash in his chest. His ribs and internal organs were clearly visible. Dark purple demon blood gushed out like spring water and sprinkled in the sky. The heart-wrenching pain caused him to let out a shrill scream that resounded through the sky. His strength had weakened a lot due to his serious injuries. His fighting spirit was gradually fading. Yun Yao alone was enough to deal with him. With Ji Tianxing, who was invincible below the martial god realm, there was only death for him. Thinking of this, he wanted to retreat. He wanted to turn around and run. On the other side, Ling Xian and Yu could barely fight Luo Shui to a draw. Ling Xian was only half a step away from the divine realm. Yu was a genuine martial god realm expert. When the two of them attacked, Yu was the main force and Ling Xian was the support. According to the current situation, Ling Xian would be killed in half an hour at most. Yu would also be injured by Luo Shui. Although he would not be killed, he could only run for his life. At this moment, a furious roar suddenly rang out from the abyss of the sea of blood behind the divine mountain. Roar. The deep and powerful roar contained endless anger and killing intent. The thousands of demons at the peak of the sacred mountain were all in awe when they heard the roar. They all looked toward the back of the sacred mountain. In the next moment, an overwhelming dark red light rose from the blood sea abyss. A figure as huge as a mountain and as black as ink rose into the sky. It was 3,000 feet tall. It was like a huge black mountain. Its body was terrifyingly strong, and it emitted overwhelming demonic chi. It opened its mouth and spat out endless demonic clouds that covered thousands of miles. The area immediately became a gloomy ghost realm. The world was pitch black. Only. This towering ogre that had suddenly appeared had the appearance of a minotaur. It had 3 heads as big as mountains and 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its back. They were half black and half red. His 4 muscular arms contained the power to destroy the world. It was as if he could crush a mountain and shatter the stars in the sky. When this giant devil appeared, everyone stopped fighting at the same time. At the top of the mountain, the thousands of surviving demon clansmen all looked relieved and excited. They all knelt down and kowtowed to Li Mu. Welcome, Ancestor Fiend Celestial. In the sky, Ling Xian Batuo and the rest were also overjoyed. They smiled as if they had survived a disaster. They also bowed respectfully to the Ancestor Fiend Celestial. In their minds, since the Ancestor Fiend Celestial had appeared, he must have broken through to the deity realm. In that case, Luo Shui and Ji Tianxing were nothing to be afraid of. And Yu retreated to the side and looked at the Ancestor Fiend Celestial expressionlessly. Ever since he entered the North Underworld Mountain, he had heard many legends about the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, but he had never seen him in person. All along, Ling Xian had represented the Ancestor Fiend Celestial to negotiate with him. Now Yu finally saw the Ancestor Fiend Celestial's power. He could not help but feel relieved. At least the Ancestor Fiend Celestial was not weak. He was qualified to cooperate with him. At this moment, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial looked down at Luo Shui, Yun Yao and Ji Tianxing. He roared with a thunderous voice, "Luo Shui, you lowly servant, you dare to come and offend us?" Luo Shui looked at him coldly and said coldly, "Previously this god was in seclusion and only sent a clone here. It is a pity that I could not kill you on the spot. Today is different. This god's true body has arrived and will definitely take your life." The Ancestor Fiend Celestial opened his wide mouth and laughed contemptuously. "Ha! You are really confident and arrogant. It is a pity that you will not have the chance in this lifetime." When he finished speaking, his body ignited with blood fire and released an incomparably powerful aura. Formless demonic chi enveloped a radius of 10,000 miles. The divine mountain shook violently and the ground shook violently. The sky was filled with endless black chi. The demons felt his aura and cheered excitedly. As for Luo Shui, Ji Tianxing and the other 2, their brows furrowed tightly as their expressions turned extremely grave. This is the aura of the deity realm? Damn it! The Ancestor Fiend Celestial has already recovered to the deity realm? It has not even been a year. How can he recover to the martial god realm? Without a doubt, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial had successfully recovered to the deity realm and became a true Fiend Celestial. At this moment, Ji Tianxing finally understood. When the Ancestor Fiend Celestial started the war and sent millions of demons to attack the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, it was all for today. Using war and killing to gather a huge amount of blood, chi and souls, it was able to recover to the deity realm so quickly. The Ancestor Fiend Celestial looked down at Luo Shui and Ji Tianxing and laughed sinisterly. "Ha! How is it? Are you very surprised? Are you regretting now? Too late. Today is my first battle after recovering to the deity realm. I will use you as a sacrifice." As he spoke, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial slowly raised his 2 arms. 2 dazzling flames lit up in his huge palms. One was blood red and the other was dark purple. After the flames dissipated, 2 ferocious-looking demonic sabers that were 10,000 feet long appeared. The blood-red demonic saber on the left was straight and narrow. Half of the blade was open, and the back of the blade was densely packed with saw teeth. The dark purple demonic saber on the right was curved like a crescent moon. The blade was very wide and at first glance it looked like a huge axe. The two demonic sabers were surrounded by surging demonic flames and emitted a mysterious and terrifying aura that seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a cold light and he muttered to himself, "This is the ancestor Fian Celestial's natal treasure, the 9 disasters demonic saber? Damn it! It has already recovered to the deity realm and can now fully display the power of the 3 calamities and 9 disasters." The ancestor Fiend Celestial of the ancient era had been called the Grim Reaper by the various races of the world. Wherever the Grim Reaper went, he would bring about the 3 calamities and 9 disasters, massacring the world and exterminating all living things. Now that the ancestor Fiend Celestial had returned to the deity realm, he would definitely bring about a shocking massacre and calamity to the Shenwu continent. At the same time, the ancestor Fiend Celestial laughed loudly and brazenly waved his 2 arms. Holding the 9 disasters demonic saber, he ruthlessly slashed out 2 blade lights that could split the heavens and earth. Chapter 2269. A ray of blood-red saber light and a ray of purple saber light. Both of them were tens of thousands of feet long and they were covered in demonic flames as they slashed through the sky. Luo Shui, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were immediately enveloped by the boundless demonic qi and light flames. Such an earth-shattering demonic aura caused the blood of over 1,000 demonic tribe members to surge as they cheered excitedly. Even Yu could not help but be surprised as he was secretly shocked. At the moment of life and death, Yun Yao did not hesitate to use the water-reverse divine sword and sent it in front of Luo Shui. She knew that with her strength as a rank 1 martial sage, it would be useless even if she had the water-reverse divine sword. After all, she would not be able to unleash the power of the divine sword, let alone defend against the ancestor demon god. Luo Shui did not hesitate as she grabbed the water-reverse divine sword and her body was covered in blue flames. She formed a sword seal with her left hand and waved the divine sword with her right hand. Instantly, 36 rays of icy blue light pierced towards the 2 saber lights in the sky. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 36 huge icy blue swords that were tens of thousands of feet long were arranged according to the position of the Big Dipper star, and they contained boundless mysteries. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a strange light as he thought, "Big Dipper star cloud sword? I only used it once," and she actually remembered it by heart and cultivated it to the Great Dipper star cloud sword. Bam 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 bam. The sword array formed by the 36 rays of sword light collided with the 2 saber lights and there was a series of loud bangs that shook the 9 heavens. At that moment, the saber light and the sword array collapsed at the same time and turned into millions of light fragments that rained down like a storm. The destructive shockwave instantly swept through a radius of 1,000 miles. The huge holy mountain was shaken by the shockwave and there were hundreds of cracks in it as rocks and soil collapsed. At least 300 demonic tribe members were killed on the spot by the shockwave. Even the 2 great demon sages Ba Tuo and Ling Xian were pushed back dozens of miles. Blood flowed from their mouths and noses as they panted heavily. Only Yu and Luo Shui, the 2 God Realm experts, remained in the sky and did not retreat. As for Yun Yao, she had already retreated hundreds of miles under Ji Tianqing's protection and was not injured. The power of the battle between martial gods was terrifying. Even the aftermath of a battle could destroy everything within 1,000 miles. The ancestral Fian Celestial's attack being blocked was within his expectations, and he was not surprised at all. It stared coldly at Luo Shui as it sneered, "One of the 3 great divine masters is nothing more than this." As it spoke, it once again waved the 9 difficulties devil blade, sending out 2 shocking blade lights that descended from the sky towards Luo Shui. The 3-kilometer-long saber light on the left was surging with blood-red light and raging flames. This was one of the 9 disasters, the karma of slaughter. It contained the aura of slaughter in the world, and it could only be cultivated by slaughtering millions of living beings. The saber light on the right was surging with black light and contained billions of wisps of black qi. This was one of the 9 disasters. Could kill all gods and corrode all living things. When the blood god wreaked havoc on the continent, he created a highly toxic plague based on this item. The power of the 2 saber lights was extremely ferocious. Before the saber light descended, the soaring saber intent contained within it caused everyone present to be filled with fear. It was as if they saw death approaching. Luo Shui had not experienced the ancient divine war and had only heard of the legend of the ancestral Fiend Celestial. However, she did not know how ferocious the death god was. Now she had finally witnessed it with her own eyes. However, she was fearless. Her left hand formed a seal as she stepped onto the Big Dipper constellation. Her right hand waved the divine sword, instantly sending out 99 icy blue sword lights. The sword lights contained the profundity of the 9 palaces' extreme array. They activated the power of the 9 heavens' thunder and attacked the 2 saber lights. Boom. Another thunderous boom reverberated in the sky like rolling thunder. The sword light and saber light shattered once again, sending out destructive shockwaves. The surviving demon race guards and experts on the mountain peak had learned their lesson this time. They had long scattered in all directions or burrowed into the divine mountain to hide. However, the divine mountain was also on the verge of collapse and half of it collapsed. After another 3 to 5 attacks, the entire divine mountain would collapse and turn into ruins. However, the ancestral fiend celestial turned a blind eye to this. His eyes were fixed on Luo Shui as he waved the 9 difficulties devil blade again and launched an attack. Luo Shui did not have the time to care about anything else. He used all his strength to defend himself. At the same time, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo flew to An Yu's side and shouted excitedly, "Lord An Yu, now is the best time to kill Ji Tianxing. What are you waiting for?" Indeed, Luo Shui was unable to protect Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao as he fought the ancestral fiend celestial with all his strength. An Yu turned his head and looked towards the south. He saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao standing side by side in the sky above the wasteland 100 miles away. They were looking at Luo Shui with concern. Seeing this, An Yu's lips curled into a sneer. He said softly, "All right. Wait until I kill Ji Tianxing. You will have to cooperate according to the agreement." A strange look flashed across Ling Xian's eyes, but he still maintained a smile on his face. He nodded without hesitation and replied, "Lord An Yu, don't worry. I will definitely abide by the agreement." An Yu looked at him meaningfully. Then he turned into a red light and flew across the sky towards Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Ling Xian looked at his back as the corners of his mouth curled up into a playful sneer. Then he and Ba Tuo followed and joined forces with An Yu to surround Ji Tianxing. "Ji Tianxing, Luo Shui can't even fend for himself now. Your time has come." Ling Xian stared at Ji Tianxing with a cold look. He revealed a smug sneer. Ji Tianxing looked at him and An Yu expressionlessly. He said in a deep voice, "Two bastards colluding with each other." An Yu frowned immediately. His entire body surged with killing intent. He shouted coldly, "Brat, you were lucky to escape back then. Today I will not repeat the same mistake. Give me your life." Just as he finished speaking, he pulled out his sword. Red light filled the sky and enveloped Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo did not stay idle. They joined forces to perform the secret skill of the demon path. Light shadows filled the sky as they attacked the 2 of them. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao quickly counterattacked. One of them slashed out a shocking sword radiance while the other released dozens of starlight pillars. The 2 of them fought in the sky above the wilderness. Their figures kept teleporting and flashing in the sky. The light shadows that covered the sky kept colliding with each other and there were loud bangs. In just 100 breaths, the 2 of them had exchanged more than 300 blows. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo were severely injured. Their bodies were covered with wounds and blood. However, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's injuries were more serious. Their white robes were stained with blood. Their hair was disheveled and they looked miserable. After all, the 2 of them were only martial sages. They had no problem dealing with Ling Xian and Ba Tuo. However, they were no match for An Yu. The 2 of them were in a precarious situation. If they continued to fight, they would most likely be killed by An Yu. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo laughed arrogantly. They were extremely pleased with themselves. At that moment, Luo Shui, who was fighting with the ancestor demon god, suddenly teleported over. "Tianxing, Yun Yao, the 2 of you go first. I will cover you." Chapter 2270. Ji Tianxing also knew that he would not be able to gain the upper hand if they continued fighting. Luo Shui could not defeat the ancestral fiend celestial and An Yu by herself. The only thing he could do now was to retreat from this place and make plans later. However, it was not that easy for him to retreat with Yun Yao. Luo Shui had just forced An Yu and Ling Xian to retreat when the ancestral fiend celestial unleashed 3 saber lights that could split heaven and earth. The 3 saber lights were of different colors and contained different calamities. However, their power was equally terrifying. Luo Shui could not ignore the 3 saber lights. She could only wave the reverse water divine sword and block with all her might. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yu and Ling Xian made a comeback and caught up with Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, who were retreating. The two of them were once again surrounded by Yu, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo. After exchanging a few blows, Yun Yao was sent flying by Ling Xian's palm strike. Ji Tianqing was about to rescue her, but he was also repelled by Yu's sword. He spat out blood as he flew dozens of miles away. Yu and Ling Xian laughed sinisterly as they pounced towards Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. They wanted to kill him on the spot. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth in anger as a raging fire burned in his chest. He had no choice but to accept reality. It was basically impossible for him to escape with Yun Yao. He could only use that trump card to successfully escape. As he waved his sword and used his ultimate technique to block the trio's attacks, he secretly took out the small golden pagoda. At this moment, Luo Shui had dispelled the ancestral Fian Celestial's attack and rushed over to save Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. She shot out hundreds of saber lights with a cold expression and sent Yu flying. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo were also struck by the saber lights. Their bodies were almost instantly killed. Hideous wounds were left on their bodies as demonic blood spurted out. The two of them screamed as they flew out and crashed into the wasteland, creating a deep crater. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing quickly teleported to Yun Yao's identity and released his magic power into the small golden pagoda without hesitation. Swoosh! The small golden pagoda released a dazzling golden light that enveloped him and Yun Yao. Before his figure disappeared, he looked deeply at Luo Shui and transmitted his voice to her. "We will leave first. You must take care of yourself. Do not linger in the battle." In the next moment, the golden light enveloped him and Yun Yao. Luo Shui turned her head and looked at the same time. She was relieved to herself to escape to save Yun Yao to escape. Following that, she used two more ultimate moves to block the ancestral demon god's attack and repelled Yu's counterattack. She didn't stay any longer and disappeared in a flash. In the next moment, she teleported to the end of the wasteland, to the end of the wasteland, to the end of the wasteland. She was to escape to Yun to escape, and Yu was filled with indignation as he chased after Luo Shui for nearly 10,000 li. However, he had lost track of Luo Shui's aura and could only give up in anger. To retreat. To the back mountain. Divine mountain was still standing behind the divine mountain. After a long time, its figure retreated into the abyss of the Blood Sea. After all, it had relied on the power of the Blood Sea abyss to recover to the godly realm. It had just broken through to the godly realm a few days ago, so its demonic foundation was not stable yet. It was still in the midst of cultivation. Once it left the Blood Sea abyss, its power would be chaotic and unstable. Not only would it weaken, but there would also be the danger of its divine power going berserk. Therefore, it would not leave the Blood Sea abyss in the short term. It needed to further strengthen its demonic foundation. The ancestral fiend god returned to the abyss and went into hibernation. The world gradually calmed down. The smoke and demonic aura that covered the sky gradually disappeared. The power of 9 disasters that permeated the heavens and earth also disappeared without a trace. On the crumbling divine mountain, more than 300 demons who had survived the calamity revealed joyful expressions. On the wasteland that was riddled with holes, the demons who had fled in panic could finally stop to catch their breath. The heavily injured Ling Xian and Ba Tuo supported each other in the sky. They looked at the wreckage of the divine mountain. Their expressions were ugly and their eyes were filled with anger. Ji Tianqing, Luo Shui, 2 damned beasts. The divine mountain has been destroyed to such an extent. How long will it take to recover? Ling Xian cursed in exasperation. His face was somewhat distorted. Ba Tuo was also filled with indignation. He said miserably, "Half a year ago, Luo Shui's doppelganger came to cause a ruckus and destroyed Sacred City and Beiming Palace. Took us several months to recover. Now more than half of the Divine Mountain has been destroyed and so many guards and elites have died. It will take at least a year to recover." At this time, Ling Xian saw a dark red light in the sky to the south. He hurriedly warned Ba Tuo, "Yu has returned. Later, don't say anything wrong. Although the ancestral fiend god has recovered, its power is still unstable. We were not able to kill Luo Shui and Ji Tianqing. We cannot let down our guard. We can still use Yu and the experts under his command." Ba Tuo nodded in understanding. Soon Yu flew back to the sky above the divine mountain. He came to Ling Xian and Ba Tuo's side. His face was gloomy. Two dark red flames burned in his eyes. Clearly his anger had not subsided. Ling Xian knew the answer, but he deliberately asked, Lord Yu, did you catch up to Luo Shui? Yu's face was dark. He did not speak. Ling Xian nodded and said to himself, it seems that she escaped. But this is normal. After all, she is one of the 3 divine lords. Lord, please be patient. Let's deal with the aftermath first, then discuss how to deal with them. Yu looked at him expressionlessly. He said in a low voice, Ling Xian, dealing with martial god Luo Shui is your demon race's matter. My goal is only Tianxia and the 72 cities. I have done what I should do. Mobilize 500,000 warriors as soon as possible. I want to take the 72 cities as soon as possible. Our plan cannot be delayed any longer. Otherwise, before he could finish, Ling Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Lord Yu, if you succeed in killing Tianxia, I will fulfill my promise. However, Tianxia has not been eliminated. He is still a great threat to us. He then pointed at the devastated divine mountain and said helplessly, and as you can see, the divine mountain of my race has been destroyed by this disaster and has been reduced to ruins. My top priority is to rebuild the divine palace and repair the divine mountain. Oh right, Lord has many strong warriors under your command. Shouldn't you borrow some to help me rebuild my home? I don't need too many. Just 20 people will be enough. Seeing Ling Xian's reaction, Yu frowned and scolded angrily, Bastard, go to hell. After scolding, he flung his sleeve angrily and flew away. When he reached the sky above the divine city, he summoned a warship and rushed to the south. Ling Xian looked at the end of the wasteland. His mouth curved into a mocking sneer as he muttered to himself. Want to take advantage of my clan? Chapter 2271. South of Dark North Mountain. Jingshan Region, 100 Origin City. Inside the dignified city lord's manor, there was a gloomy atmosphere. The guards and maids were very careful, not daring to make any noise when they walked and even speaking in hushed tones. This was because everyone knew that when Lord Yu returned in the evening, his face was very gloomy, and his entire body was wrapped in anger. At this time no one dared to provoke him. Within Yu's study, he was sitting in front of his desk, fiddling with a dark silver diamond-shaped crystal in his hand as he expressionlessly looked out the window. It was obvious that he was thinking about something extremely important. The guard captain, who was wearing black armor and missing 2 legs, stood respectfully beside the desk. Both of them were silent. After a long time, the guard captain could not help but speak to Yu. Captain, we can't continue like this. The demons clearly don't trust us and they're even plotting against us. We need to increase our military strength and report this news to the general. Otherwise, we won't even be able to defend the 5 southern regions, let alone occupy the 72 cities. Yu remained silent, still weighing the pros and cons. The guard captain continued to persuade him. As you know, the general's flagship is currently leading a team of guards to this star field. As long as you send out a message, the general will definitely bring the guards over. At that time, not only will we be able to seize Dark North Mountain, but the entire Shenwu continent will be ours. Yu finally reacted and turned to glare at the guard captain. He sneered and asked, Are you sure that Shenwu continent will still be ours after the general arrives? If the general knows that we've discovered a vast and rich world, will he only bring a team of guards? There are also other warships, at least 30 captains and close to 10,000 soldiers. All of them will flock over. At this point, Yu angrily hammered the table and sneered. At that time, the general will certainly be able to rule the entire continent and become the master of this world. However, the territories and resources of the 3 divine kingdoms will be cleanly divided by those 30 bastards. I've lost more than half of my men, so how can I compete with them? If things go wrong, the general might even take my men apart and assign them to other warships. As for me, I can only be the assistant of the other captains. The guard captain was shocked, and he finally understood Yu's worries and concerns. He hurriedly shook his head and consoled, Your Excellency, you're overthinking. You are the first to discover this world. The general will definitely reward you handsomely. At that time, not only will we not split up your guards, we will even reward you greatly and allocate more guards to you. Yu did not speak. After a moment of consideration, he nodded slightly and said, This is possible. But I can't believe it. I have to be prepared. The guard captain asked in confusion, Sir, what do you mean? And Yu said in a low voice, Of course, the news has to be reported to the general. When he receives the news and arrives in this world, it will take about a year. Moreover, this world was sealed by the power of the gods. Even with the general's strength, he could not force his way in. He could only find an opening to enter. I still have a year, so I can make some preparations in advance. At that time, when the general descends into this world, I will become his most trusted and most valued confidant. The guard captain's blood boiled as he listened. His heart was filled with anticipation. He nodded repeatedly and said, That's right. We must not lose to the other battleships. We must be the heroes of the Third Fleet. And you did not hesitate any longer. He channeled a ball of blood-red light into the dark silver diamond-shaped crystal. Then he held the diamond-shaped crystal in his hand and entered the dark secret chamber. Through a mysterious array, he sent the diamond-shaped crystal out. Zhoosh! A dot of starlight flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. North of the ruins of God. In the Zhu 10 Absolutes Tower in the Yinyang secret realm. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao opened their eyes one after another and looked at their surroundings. They saw an ancient altar that was hundreds of meters tall beneath their feet. On the cold black stone floor, there was a mysterious array diagram carved on it. There were 18 demon god statues around it. All of them looked ferocious, and they exuded an ancient and powerful aura. Around the altar was a spacious and bright palace. It was at least 1,000 feet in radius. On the walls of the palace there were gemstone lamps. There was a huge star map on the dome. It emitted dazzling starlight and illuminated the entire palace. Yun Yao could also sense that every light spot in the vast star map seemed to be a real star. She raised her hand to tidy up her messy hair and asked subconsciously, Tianxing, where are we? Ji Tianxing sat beside her and looked at her with concern. He used his divine sense to check her injuries. When he heard Yun Yao's question, he replied without raising his head, We are in a divine pagoda. The divine pagoda is in the mystic realm in the north of the ruins of God. This place is absolutely safe. Even the martial gods can't find it. Yun Yao was startled and asked subconsciously, Really? You didn't leave it behind, did you? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and chuckled. Of course not. This is a divine pagoda left behind by the demon god king. I haven't figured it out yet. Yun Yao immediately became interested and asked, If you haven't figured it out, how can you teleport directly from the north underworld mountain to the ruins of God? How did you get this divine pagoda? Seeing that Ji Tianxing was engrossed in it, she shook her head gently and said, Don't worry. I'm only slightly injured. It's nothing serious. Ji Tianxing checked her and found that her injuries were indeed not serious. However, he was still a little worried and asked, What about the children? Did you hurt them? Don't worry. The children are not so delicate. Yun Yao smiled and comforted him gently. Ji Tianxing was relieved and told her the process of getting the Zhu 10 Absolutes pagoda. Yun Yao was engrossed in it and her mood fluctuated. In the end, after listening to Ji Tianxing's narration of the entire process, she finally revealed an expression of relief. She sighed in disbelief. I really didn't expect that such a powerful and heaven-defying artifact would be hidden on this seemingly ordinary continent. Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement and said, Yes, I left in a hurry back then and didn't see this world clearly. I missed a lot of things. Now that I have a new understanding of this world, I realize that the five elements world is not simple. At least, it's different from the ordinary inferior worlds. Yun Yao suddenly thought of something and immediately revealed a worried expression. She asked, Oh right, where's Jiku? Did you save her? Ji Tianxing nodded and said, Don't worry. When you and Luo Shui were killing, I had already destroyed the torture department and saved Cuckoo. Her injuries are too serious and she's recuperating in the sword world. Let me circulate my energy and recuperate for a few days before casting a spell to save her. Yun Yao nodded slightly and said, That's good too. If you need my help, call me. Chapter 2272. Seeing that Yun Yao was about to send a message to Luo Shui, Ji Tianxing waved his hand. The divine pagoda can isolate all powers and even the heavenly Tao. Communication jade slips are even more useless. As he spoke, he activated the Dao Yuo divine array and left the divine pagoda with Yun Yao. In the next instant, The two of them appeared outside the Yin-Yang mystic realm on the barren mountain that was thousands of feet tall. Yunyao was shocked and could not believe that the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda had such terrifying power. Ji Tianxing did not explain further and only said one sentence. Back then I stayed in the divine pagoda for a long time and delayed my tribulation. After I left the divine pagoda, I underwent 2 consecutive tribulations in a day. Yunyao was even more shocked and completely believed it at the same time. After calming herself down, she took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Luo Shui. After waiting for about half an hour, she received a jade slip from Luo Shui. After reading the information in the jade slip, she was obviously relieved and said to Ji Tianxing, "Fortunately, after we escaped, the Divine Master also left. I already expected that with her strength, even if the ancestral Fiend Celestial and you worked together, they would not be able to stop her." Ji Tianxing nodded and did not say much. However, he was still worried and thought to himself, now that the ancestral Fiend Celestial has just broken through to the divine realm, the Fiend Celestial's foundation is not stable yet. Naturally, he would not risk his life to stop Luo Shui. In another 3 to 5 years, when the ancestral Fiend Celestial's foundation is stable and his strength is even stronger, Luo Shui might not be his match. After a while, he collected his thoughts and took out a communication jade slip to send a message to the Huanglong Taoist. He said in the jade slip that he had successfully rescued Ji Ku and was not in danger. However, he still had matters to attend to and might not be able to return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for a few months. He asked the Huanglong Taoist to guard the sect well. After sending the message, Ji Tianxing brought Yunyao back to the 5th level of the Divine Pagoda. Yunyao took out an elixir and consumed it, preparing to circulate her energy to heal her injuries. However, Ji Tianxing struck out a dazzling light with his palm and moved the 18 demon god statues. Swish swish swish. The 18 Fey god statues spun rapidly and soon changed their order. Then a mysterious white light shone from the statue, and a door of light appeared on the altar. Yunyao didn't understand what he meant and asked in confusion, "Tianxing, what are you doing? Where does this portal lead to?" Ji Tianxing pointed to the top of his head and revealed a playful smile. "Of course. I'll take you to an interesting place. You'll definitely like it." "Interesting place?" Yunyao blinked her eyes, revealing an expectant look. Ji Tianxing didn't say much and pulled her into the light door. Shwa. In the next instant, the two of them left the 5th level and entered the 6th level of the Divine Pagoda. The surroundings were pitch black like the outerium, and it was cold and silent. Yunyao looked around and asked doubtfully, "Tianxing, is this the interesting place you mentioned just now?" It was pitch black, cold and silent, just like the void outside. However, it doesn't seem right. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth is flowing here. It doesn't seem like the void. At the same time, Yaya's voice rang in Yunyao and Ji Tianxing's minds. "Humph. Father lied to us. It's so dark here. How is it interesting?" The childish voice was crisp and cute, but there was a hint of anger in it. Ji Tianxing and Yunyao couldn't help but laugh. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "All right, I won't keep you in suspense. This is the 6th level of the Divine Pagoda. The space-time here is chaotic, and the flow of time is 50 times faster than the outside world. We have been cultivating here for 50 years, and only 1 year has passed in the 5 elements realm." Only then did Yunyao come to a sudden realization. Her eyes were filled with extraordinary splendor. She said with a heart full of anticipation, "It really is a magical place. I just refined the wind-fire sacred pearl and broke through to the martial sage realm not long ago. I haven't really absorbed the power of the sacred pearl. Since that's the case, I will cultivate in seclusion here and refine the power of the sacred pearl as soon as possible." Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. "All right, don't worry and cultivate." Yunyao reminded him a few more times before finding a place in the dark to sit down and heal her injuries. Ji Tianxing didn't waste any more time. He took out an elixir and consumed it, quickly healing his injuries. 5 days passed quickly. His injuries were stabilized and there weren't any major problems. His magic power was also fully recovered. He took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and entered the Sword World to check on Ji Ku's situation. When he saw Ji Ku, it was at the peak of a mountain outside peaceful Earth City. She was still unconscious, lying quietly on a millstone on the mountain peak. The Golden Mountain King and the Xitigarbha divine armor were guarding near the mountain peak, watching her with concern. In the valley there was a towering ancient tree that was tens of thousands of feet tall. It stretched out hundreds of millions of branches. It was Patriarch Sanju's Dharma body. It used to be the green light treasure tree. When Ji Tianxing arrived at the mountain peak, it was continuously releasing green wood true qi that enveloped Jiku. The green wood true qi contained a powerful life force. It constantly purified Jiku's demonic qi and replenished her life force. However, Jiku's injuries were very serious, especially her soul. Patriarch Sanju's green wood true qi could only heal Aku's physical injuries. It couldn't expel the demonic qi or heal the injuries to her soul. Seeing Ji Tianxing arrive, Patriarch Sanju hurriedly stopped casting and shouted respectfully, "Greetings, Master." Ji Tianxing nodded and waved at him. "Sanju, you can go back and rest." After Patriarch Sanju bowed respectfully, he retreated into the depths of the mountain and fell asleep. Ji Tianxing dismissed the Jinshan King and the Xitigarbha divine armor. He stood alone on the mountain peak and looked at Jiku, who was sleeping. Jiku's cheeks were covered by her messy long hair. Her exposed neck and arms were still dark purple. Her appearance was still demonized. The aura of her soul was very weak. Under the protection of the heavenly star chain, it was slowly fluctuating. Ji Tianxing sat beside her and slowly reached out to push her long hair aside. He held her blood-stained face and looked at her deeply. Cuckoo, why are you so silly? If it weren't for the heavenly star chain protecting you, if I hadn't arrived in time, you would have been dead." He looked at Jiku affectionately and muttered to himself, "I know that you're not afraid of death and you don't regret dying for me. But do you know that I've already seen you die with my own eyes? How can I make the same mistake and let the same tragedy happen again? From now on, I won't allow you to do such a stupid thing again. I'll protect you forever. I don't need your protection or sacrifice anymore." After saying that, he slowly raised his palms and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb. It released 2 streaks of dense white light that covered Jiku's body. Immediately, the white light spread out and silently entered Jiku's body. All demonic qi and demonic qi would quickly dissipate when they came into contact with the white light. Jiku's body was being demonized at a visible speed and returned to its original appearance. Chapter 2273. After about 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianxing finally retracted his palms and stopped casting the spell. Jiku had completely shed her demonized state and returned to her original appearance. Ji Tianxing rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while and found a dark red heavenly fire glass dress. This dress was very exquisite and luxurious. It was also a saint-level Dharma treasure with powerful defense and many other uses. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and shot out a ray of fire, which wrapped around the heavenly fire glass dress and covered Jiku's body. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the fiery red dress was like a living thing. It was properly worn on Jiku's body. Jiku, who had changed her clothes, showed her original appearance and elegance even though she was still unconscious. She was youthful, energetic, charming, and had a noble and playful temperament. Ji Tianxing stared at her and muttered to himself, "Her physical injuries are very serious, but they are nothing to worry about. She will recover in 3 months. However, I don't know how long it will take for her soul to recover." After thinking for a moment, he took out 2 pills to heal soul injuries from his interspatial ring and gave them to Jiku. Then he sat cross-legged in front of Jiku and formed a seal with both hands. He released a vast amount of magic power to help her refine the pills. Half a day later, the 2 pills were refined by Jiku. He then used the power of the pills to heal Jiku's soul injuries. Unknowingly, another half a month passed. Jiku absorbed more than half of the 2 saint-level pills' medicinal effects. Her soul injuries were much more stable. Therefore, Ji Tianxing used the power of the heaven-mending pearl to heal Jiku's injuries. The heaven-mending pearl had always been in his sea of consciousness, nurturing his soul. Moreover, the heaven-mending pearl recovered its power very slowly. If it was used up all at once, it would take at least 3 to 5 years to recover. However, Ji Tianxing couldn't care less in order to save Jiku. He didn't hesitate to use the power of the heaven-mending pearl to heal Jiku as soon as possible. Time flew by. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. For a total of 180 days, Ji Tianxing had been sitting on top of the millstone, circulating his energy day and night. He had been treating Jiku's injuries without stopping for a moment. Even if he was mentally exhausted, he didn't care at all. White light continued to surge out of his palms, wrapping around the Jiku as it floated in front of him like a huge cocoon. At this moment, the white light became dimmer and thinner. Ji Tianxing held on for another 2 hours before the white light finally dried up completely. Clearly, the power of the heaven-mending pearl had been completely exhausted. Only then did he stop casting and finally stop. Phew! Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He lay on the big rock with his eyes closed, panting heavily. A strong sense of weariness assaulted his mind, causing him to be unable to help but fall asleep. At this moment, the white ball of light floating in the air gradually shrunk. All of the white light entered Jiku's body and quickly disappeared. Then Jiku, who was wearing a fiery red dress, appeared and gradually landed on the big millstone. She slowly opened her eyes, uttered a vague sound from her mouth and slowly sat up. She looked around with a blank expression. Seeing that she was surrounded by green mountains and clear waters, and the blue sky above her head, she was suddenly stunned. She had never seen such a tranquil and peaceful scenery in the past few years in the North Underworld mountain. At that moment she even thought that she was seeing things. She couldn't help but whisper, "Where is this place? Am I dead?" While saying that, she couldn't help but raise her hand and rub her eyes. But when she saw her palms and arms, she was immediately stunned again. Her fair and tender palms were no longer an ugly dark purple color. Her nails were also sparkling and translucent like jade, no longer demonic black. On her slender and white arms, she was wearing an exquisite and gorgeous fiery red dress, decorated with cloud patterns and gemstones. This dress used to be her favorite color and style. But after entering the North Underworld mountain, she could never wear it again. And now she had finally returned to her original appearance, wearing her favorite fiery red dress. She only felt disbelief, as if she was immersed in a beautiful dream and illusion. Suddenly, a warm current flowed through her heart and her body trembled. She couldn't help but want to cry. At that moment, a pair of warm and strong arms slowly stretched out from behind her, tightly hugging her waist. Her body trembled and she quickly turned her head. What she saw was a face that was inches away from her. He was handsome and valiant, with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. His deep eyes had the most enchanting light. This was such a familiar face. He had appeared thousands of times in her memory, and she couldn't bear to part with him even after 3 lifetimes. Jiku was stunned on the spot. Her eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. For a moment she forgot to breathe and speak. She simply couldn't believe that when she woke up from her daze, the first thing she saw was the person she couldn't let go of the most, and also the person she wanted to see the most. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes containing too many complicated emotions. Neither of them spoke. Everything was so quiet. After a full 10 breaths, Jiku finally regained her senses. Her nearly blank mind was filled with a strong sense of surprise. "Big brother Tianxing," she cried out in a sobbing voice. The tears that had accumulated in her clear eyes could no longer be controlled. 2 crystal-clear teardrops immediately flowed out and slid down her cheeks. Ji Tianxing didn't say anything. He only blinked at her and revealed a gentle smile. Jiku was stunned for a moment. She instinctively wanted to ask him what was going on. However, just as she opened her cherry lips, she was enveloped by a warm mouth. She immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Her eyes suddenly widened and there was a strong sense of surprise in them. Her heart was also filled with disbelief. Her body stiffened on the spot. Her mind, which had just recovered its ability to think, suddenly went blank again. Jiku was completely stunned. The sudden surprise and happiness made her completely unable to believe it. She didn't know how to react. There was only one thought in her mind. This can't be real. This must be a dream. Yes, I must be dreaming. But this dream is so real. I don't want to wake up. After an unknown period of time. Perhaps it was a quarter of an hour, or perhaps it was an hour. His warm and domineering mouth moved away, and his handsome and charming face also retreated, revealing an expression that was like a smile yet not a smile. However, Jiku was still stunned on the spot. Her eyes were closed and she didn't move at all, like a stone statue. A certain someone finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He pretended to cough twice and said in a strange tone, I think I might have awakened some kind of supernatural power. Hearing the familiar voice, Jiku finally regained her senses. She opened her eyes and asked him in confusion, "What supernatural power?" "A supernatural power that can turn people into stone," Ji Tianxing said with a serious face. "I tried it just now and it really turned her into stone. Also, it made her mind go blank and she lost the ability to think." Chapter 2274. How could Jiku not know that Ji Tianxing was deliberately teasing her? She lowered her head in embarrassment and couldn't help but spit at him. "Big brother Tianxing, you're getting more and more improper." Ji Tianxing chuckled and slowly lay down on the millstone. He put his arms behind his head and looked up at the blue sky with a satisfied smile on his face. "It's so good to be alive." He raised his eyebrows and said with emotion. Jiku immediately understood what he meant and couldn't help but pout. She lay down beside Ji Tianxing and propped her face with her hands. She looked at him with an aggrieved expression and whispered, "Big brother Tianxing, I'm sorry. It's my fault. If I hadn't been so stubborn, my identity wouldn't have been exposed and you wouldn't have been in danger." Before she could finish speaking, Ji Tianxing reached out a finger and pressed it against her lips. "Cuckoo, I know you're trying to help me. Of course I won't blame you for what happened. Even if I have to go to heaven or go to hell, I'll definitely save you. But I hope that you won't be so stupid to bear all the hardships and dangers by yourself. Yao Yao and I don't want to see you treat yourself like this anymore. We all hope that you can live well and be happy and carefree." Jiku's expression changed a little. She lowered her head guiltily and asked in a low voice, "Eldest senior sister also knows about this?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a smile. Not only did she know, but she also rushed to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and insisted on going to Baiming Palace with me to save you. I was worried about her safety, so I trapped her in the secret chamber. But I didn't expect that she actually broke the array I set up and escaped from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Later she asked the Luoshui martial god for help and went to Baiming Palace to fight, so I took the opportunity to save you. Jiku was surprised and asked in disbelief, "Big brother Tianxing, is that true? When first senior sister found out that you risked your life to save me, not only was she not angry, she didn't try to stop you. Instead she came to save me personally?" Ji Tianxing nodded again and said in a serious tone, "Yao Yao is not the kind of person you think she is. She is also not an ordinary woman. How can you judge her with common sense? She wasn't angry and she didn't try to stop you. She only felt worried and guilty about you." "Guilty?" Jiku frowned in confusion. "She's already married to you. She's your legal wife. But I still can't let go of the knot in my heart and have always wanted to follow you. Why would she feel guilty?" Ji Tianxing said with some emotion, "Maybe she will say those words to you personally in the future. Let's not talk about this today." Jiku nodded with a complicated expression. His heart was filled with a myriad of emotions and thoughts. At this time Ji Tianxing held her wrist and said seriously, "Don't move." She recalled what Ji Tianxing had said before. She recalled what had happened in the Tianxian continent. She also recalled the time when she and Ji Tianxing were childhood sweethearts in the Clear Sky Kingdom. But now she ended her memories and flew into the depths of the darkness. That was because she had been using her divine consciousness to observe Yun Yao's movements. Yun Yao had just finished recuperating and had already woken up. Swoosh! Jiku crossed the darkness and landed in front of Yun Yao. Yun Yao sensed her aura approaching and immediately opened her eyes. Seeing that it was Jiku who was in a good state of mind and did not look like she had yet to recover from her injuries, she immediately revealed a gratified smile. "Aku, you're finally awake. How are your injuries?" Jiku stared at Yun Yao. Seeing that she was as beautiful as a fairy, her eyes were sincere and her smile was warm, she could not help but feel guilty. She bowed slightly to Yun Yao and said, "Greetings, senior sister." Yun Yao quickly reached out to support her. She shook her head gently and said, "Aku, there's no need to be so polite between us." Jiku held her hands with a complicated expression. After hesitating for a moment, she said sincerely, "Senior sister, thank you for your help. If not for your help, I would have died in Baiming Palace." Yun Yao saw that she wanted to say something but stopped. She immediately understood and said with a warm smile, "Aku, if it's just to thank me, there's no need to mention it." Chapter 2275. Jiku didn't try to hide it. She nodded and said, "Eldest senior sister, you're Tianqing's wife, the person I envy the most. You know how I feel about him and you know how dangerous Beiming Palace is. Why did you agree to let him save me? If you dissuade him or don't help him, I will die in Beiming Palace. That way no one will blame you. And in his heart there will no longer be me. He will only love you wholeheartedly." Yun Yao shook her head and said with a solemn expression, "Ah Ku, these are the thoughts of ordinary people. They're selfish and stupid. You and I are the most important people to Tianqing. It's my duty to save you. You should know very well that no matter which of us is in danger, Tianqing will risk his life to save us. We have to live well. If either of us unfortunately dies, it will make Tianqing suffer for the rest of his life. He won't forget it. It will only be engraved in his heart and engraved in his soul. Just like your feelings for him. Even after reincarnation they still haven't changed." At this point Yun Yao held Jike's hand tightly and said emotionally, "Actually, I already regretted it the moment I found out about your identity. In your previous life you chased after him your whole life. You crossed the 3 realms and didn't manage to fulfill your wish until you died. In this life you were his childhood sweetheart. You were devoted to him and didn't fear death. If I didn't appear, you would have gotten married to him and fulfilled your long-cherished wish from your previous life. But it was too late for me to regret it. At that time I was already married to Tianqing and I loved him deeply. I couldn't and wouldn't leave him. But the deeper his love for me, the more guilty I felt. Because I know that your love for him is no less than mine. I can sacrifice myself for Tianqing. You can do it too. You've even died for him once. Only then can I understand how torturous the pain of not being able to love someone deeply is." When she heard this, Jike's eyes were filled with a layer of mist. Her heart was both sad and moved. She pursed her lips tightly, trying not to cry. But for some unknown reason, the tears in her eyes could not be controlled and silently slipped out of her eyes. She shook her head and said in a choked voice, "Eldest senior sister, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you. I'm not trying to snatch brother Tianqing away from you." Yun Yao smiled faintly. She reached out to wipe away the tears on her face and comforted her. "Ah Ku, you've never wronged anyone. You don't have to apologize to anyone. I owe you. I'm the one who should apologize. I was the one who snatched the position that originally belonged to you and made you suffer. But you didn't blame me nor did you hate me. You're still as infatuated as ever. You're willing to sacrifice your life for Tianqing. You're so magnanimous and forgiving. This is what true love means. It goes deep into your bones." Jike had never thought that there would be a day when someone would understand her so well and say such words. Moreover, these words came from Yun Yao's mouth. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart and she couldn't help but cry out loud. Yun Yao opened her arms and hugged her. She patted her back gently and said in a solemn tone, "Ah Ku, don't leave me again. We'll be together forever. You don't have to suppress yourself anymore. You don't have to pretend. You've already suffered so much pain and torture for Tianqing. In the future he'll make it up to you twice as much. You'll have to repay him for the rest of your life." Jike's body stiffened and her eyes widened in disbelief. When she came back to her senses, she quickly broke free from Yun Yao's embrace and shook her head. "No. Eldest senior sister, this isn't right. It's not fair to you." Yun Yao pressed her shoulders with both hands and said sincerely, "Ah Ku, this is the only way to be fair to you and me. Tianqing won't let anyone down. This is also the only way that you, Tianqing, and I won't be in pain and regret. Unless you don't want to be with Tianqing?" Jike quickly shook her head and couldn't help but say, "No, no, no. I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." Yun Yao smiled and nodded. "That's right. All right, you don't have to say anything else. It's settled." But Jike was still in disbelief and wanted to ask a few more questions. However, Yun Yao waved her hand and turned to leave with a smile. Jike stood in the darkness in a daze, watching her figure disappear into the distance. She couldn't help but have mixed feelings in her heart. But more than that, he felt relieved and touched. Time passed quickly in the dark space. 3 months, half a year, 1 year, 2 years. 3 years passed unknowingly. Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion for 3 whole years. He had mastered many of the secret arts and added many changes to the secret arts of Sword Dao. At the same time, his strength increased by 5 times and he reached the 5th level martial sage realm. After stabilizing his martial Dao foundation, he temporarily stopped cultivating. This was because someone used their spiritual consciousness to wake him up. He opened his eyes and saw that the person standing beside him was Yun Yao. Yun Yao had also cultivated in seclusion for 3 years and seemed to have refined the power of the wind-fire sacred pearl. Her strength had also increased by leaps and bounds, and she had reached the 4th level martial sage realm. In just 3 years she had advanced by 3 levels. This was an unprecedented talent. Ji Tianxing was shocked and was about to ask Yun Yao. However, Yun Yao spoke first and said worriedly, "Tianxing, something happened." Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and asked, "What's wrong, Yao Yao? What happened?" Yun Yao said worriedly, "Ku is missing." "What?" Ji Tianxing's heart tightened and he turned around to search. After searching the entire dark space, he did not see Ji Ku. He could not help but frown and asked hurriedly, "Yao Yao, what happened? How did Ku disappear into thin air? Could it be that she has some grudges and left secretly? But that's not right. Only I can control this sacred pagoda and enter it as I wish." Yun Yao was also confused and said seriously, "About 3 years ago I met her and we had a lot to talk about. At that time I confessed to her." "Confessed to what?" Ji Tianxing asked subconsciously. "Why are you asking the obvious?" Yun Yao rolled her eyes at him. "Of course I persuaded her to stay and be with us." Ji Tianxing immediately revealed an awkward expression and muttered in a low voice, "Yao Yao, you wouldn't have suggested to make her my concubine, so she left in a fit of anger, right?" Yun Yao frowned and said in a low voice, "What wife and concubine? I don't have such thoughts and I won't treat her differently." Ji Tianxing trusted her and knew that she would not say such things. That's strange. What was Cuckoo thinking? Why did she leave without saying goodbye? He frowned and thought for a while but could not think of a reason. Chapter 2276. Jiku was not in the dark space of the 6th level. Thus, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao quickly left and returned to the 5th level. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the two of them appeared in the spacious and bright hall and stood on the altar. As soon as the two of them steadied themselves, Yun Yao let out a low cry. "Aku, why are you here?" Ji Tianxing turned to look at her and saw a girl in a fiery red dress sitting on the ground beside her. The beautiful girl in the red dress was Ji Ku. She was sitting cross-legged in the origin divine formation with her hands on her knees. Her eyes were closed as she cultivated. Even when Yun Yao shouted, she didn't react. She didn't move at all. There was a silver pearl necklace around her fair neck that was shining with dazzling starlight. The origin divine formation beneath her also began to glow with gold and silver light and was in the process of activating. The 18 demon god statues around the altar were all shining with gold, silver, red, black and blue lights. The colorful lights gathered around Ji Ku, forming a hazy light shield that protected her firmly. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao quickly retreated and stood at the edge of the altar. After all, the origin divine formation had been activated, and the demon god statues had also changed. The two of them didn't dare to stay in the formation lest they affect Ji Ku. Yun Yao observed for a moment and couldn't help but frown. She asked in confusion, "Tianxing, what is Aku doing? Why did she leave the 6th level alone and come back here? Also, this formation and those demon god statues seem to have some kind of connection with her?" Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at Ji Ku. After observing for a long time, he shook his head. "I'm afraid only she knows what's going on. But I can roughly guess that it might have something to do with her identity and that heavenly star chain." Identity? Heavenly star chain? Yun Yao was stunned for a moment and vaguely understood something. "You mean she was the bright moon demon emperor in her previous life, so she was originally a demon? Also, that heavenly star chain is a divine artifact and it's very likely to be the key to these changes?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said calmly, "That's right. In her previous life, she possessed the bloodline of the demon clan and eventually became a divine lord with remarkable abilities. Although her current strength was still very weak. However, she has already recovered some of her memories, and it is very likely that she has resonated and connected with the supernatural entity statue." Yun Yao nodded with a smile and said expectantly, "If that's the case, she has encountered an opportunity and is likely to reap great benefits because of it." Ji Tianxing also revealed a look of anticipation. He nodded and said, "There will definitely be opportunities and gains. Let's not disturb her and just wait and see." After that, the two of them quieted down and didn't say anything more. The two stood at the edge of the altar and waited patiently for 2 days. However, Jiku was still in a deep sleep and showed no signs of waking up. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing could only bring Yun Yao and leave the 5th level temporarily. Forget it, we don't know how long it will take for her to wake up. We can't just wait like this. Let's go back to the 6th level and cultivate in seclusion. After we finish cultivating, she will wake up. Then the two of them returned to the 6th level. They each found a place with abundant and stable energy and sat in the darkness to cultivate in seclusion. The flow of time in the 6th level was different from that in the 5th level. It was almost 50 times faster. Only about a month had passed in the 5th level. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao cultivated in seclusion in the 6th level for another 4 years. During this period of seclusion, Ji Tianxing's strength increased again and he reached the rank 6 martial sage realm. Yun Yao completely refined the power of the weathering divine pearl and broke through 2 realms consecutively. He had also reached the rank 6 martial sage realm. However, the potential and power of the divine pearl had been exhausted. If she continued to cultivate in seclusion, there wouldn't be much meaning as her strength would increase at a much slower rate. Ji Tianxing was facing a similar problem. If he cultivated in seclusion for a long period of time, his strength wouldn't increase continuously. He had to settle down for a period of time and consolidate his martial arts foundation. Then the two of them ended their seclusion and left the 6th level together. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, the two of them returned to the 5th level of the divine pagoda and landed on the altar. They saw that the great Luo divine array on the ground had lost its radiance and it had obviously stopped operating. The 18 demon god statues around them also became dim and returned to their normal state. Only Jiku was still sitting in the middle of the altar. His hands were forming seals as he maintained his cultivation posture. A ball of multicolored light wrapped around her like a cocoon. However, the 5-colored radiance was obviously much weaker and it was gradually dissipating. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao looked at each other. The two of them knew that Jiku was likely to wake up. As expected, half a day later, the 5-colored radiance that wrapped around her completely disappeared. She gradually opened her eyes, and the mysterious aura that filled her body also gradually disappeared. When she saw clearly what was in front of her, she saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao looking at her expectantly. "Big brother Tianxing? Eldest senior sister? Why are you here?" Jiku hurriedly stood up and greeted them apologetically. The two of them nodded slightly and looked at her with bright eyes, carefully sizing her up. Ji Tianxing asked, "Cuckoo, weren't you on the 6th level? Why are you here? Also, you've been sleeping on the altar for more than a month. What happened?" At the mention of this, Jiku's expression became even more apologetic. "Big brother Tianxing, eldest senior sister, it's like this. When we were on the 6th level, both of you were cultivating in seclusion. I also know that the flow of time there is different and it's most suitable for seclusion. However, after meditating for a few days, I still couldn't enter the state of cultivation. There seemed to be some kind of voice calling out to me, invading my soul and making me unable to calm down. The heavenly star chain was also shining with starlight, and there was a powerful divine power surging around it. Seemed very strange. I simply stopped cultivating in seclusion. I wore the heavenly star chain, closed my eyes and followed the call of the unseen." At this point, Jiku paused and looked at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's expressions. As if afraid that the two of them wouldn't believe her, she said weakly, "Later, I seemed to have fallen asleep, but I also seemed to be wrapped by some kind of power. When I woke up and opened my eyes, I was already on the 5th level. At that time I was sitting on the altar, and the heavenly star chain around my neck was shining with starlight. The array patterns on the ground and the dozen or so statues around me all lit up and released a powerful force. All kinds of forces gathered and drowned me like a flood." Chapter 2277. Even though Jiku's narration sounded very bizarre, if it were any other person they would not believe such a thing at all. However, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were different. Both of them had experienced all kinds of thrilling and bizarre things long ago. They also had extraordinary knowledge and background. Therefore both of them could accept and believe what Jiku said. Both of them looked at Jiku expectantly and asked, "What happened after that? What happened to you in the dreamland?" Jiku was stunned for a moment and asked with a strange expression, "Brother Tianxing, eldest senior sister, what I said just now was so bizarre, but you actually believed it?" "Shui." I still can't believe that everything I experienced before was real. Hearing her say this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao became even more curious. Cuckoo, what exactly did you experience? Tell us quickly. Did you see something special in the illusion? Or did you get some kind of opportunity? Jiku nodded and said as she recalled, in the illusion I seemed to have turned into a bird flying at the top of the sky. Under the sky there were mountains and rivers, ancient and majestic cities and all kinds of strange powerhouses. They were fighting fiercely in the sky, and when they cast spells, rings of colorful halos would light up behind them. I vaguely remember that it seemed to be the power of the Maxim, which only the gods of the upper realm have. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing quickly nodded in agreement. That's right. Only the real gods can control the power of the Maxim and give birth to the Maxim halo. The more Maxim halos a god has, the more Maxim he can control and the stronger he is. It seems that the scene you saw in the illusion should be an illusion of the god realm. Jiku got the encouragement and affirmation, so she dispelled her worries and continued. After that, many gods who were all powerful fought in the sky. They were so powerful that they could pick the stars and the moon, and they could crush a world with a wave of their hands. I vaguely remember that there were over 100 of them and they all had 3 heads and 6 arms. They were bare-chested and looked extremely ferocious. They were besieging an illusory figure in the sky. Looked like a huge bird that could cover the sky and the sun. It could release flames that could destroy the world. There were also a dozen or so Yao gods of different shapes and sizes. They seemed to be the subordinates of the flaming bird, and they were resisting the attacks of the giants with all their might. It was unknown how long they had been fighting, but they had actually shattered the sky. More than a dozen Yao gods had been slaughtered by the giants. The giant flaming bird was also smashed into pieces, turning into a rain of fire that rained down from the sky. There were many cracks in the sky and there was also a huge white light vortex. Many flames passed through the cracks and fell into the void. However, a flame fell into the white light vortex and disappeared. After that, the illusion naturally dissipated. But I couldn't wake up. Scenes of the battle kept appearing in my soul, and the shadow of that giant flaming bird. At this point, Jiku finished his story. However, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were not done listening. Their eyes were shining. It ended just like that. That's impossible, right? The scene in the illusion was actually a battle between the upper realm gods? This could be a great opportunity. The two of them were overwhelmed with emotions as they fantasized about the magnificent scene. Many thoughts and guesses were formed. After a while, Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and looked at Jiku with a serious expression. He said, Cuckoo, it's definitely not a coincidence that you could enter such a bizarre illusion. If I'm not wrong, it must be related to your identity in this divine pagoda. The dozen or so Yao gods that you mentioned, are they very similar to these Yao god statues? After saying that, he pointed at the many statues around the altar. Jiku looked at the Yao god statues around him and quickly nodded. Yes. Their appearance and aura are very similar to these statues. Ji Tianxing was even more certain of his conjecture. He asked impatiently, Cuckoo, think about it again. Other than the scene in the illusion, what else did you see? Jiku frowned and recalled silently for a moment. Then he showed a surprised expression. I remember now. After the illusion ended, my mind was in a daze and I was still in a state of drowsiness. At that time, there seemed to be a lot of miscellaneous information that flooded into my soul like seawater. I was dizzy for a long time before I woke up. Those miscellaneous information seemed to be Yao clan's words and symbols. There were more than 9,000 of them in total. It's just that I didn't have time to study those words. I don't know what they mean. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao looked at each other and smiled happily. Pa Cuckoo, you're so silly. You found a treasure, you know? Ji Tianxing laughed heartily. Yun Yao also smiled and said, Aku, those 9,000 Yao clan's words and symbols are probably some kind of information, divine skills or secrets. All in all, if you can have such a fortuitous encounter, the information you obtained must be priceless. Jiku was still a little confused. He shook his head in disbelief and said, That can't be right. Isn't this divine pagoda Big Brother Tianxing's? I didn't do anything. Why would I encounter such a strange thing? It's even more impossible for me to obtain any divine skills or secrets. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and explained with a smile, Cuckoo, speaking of this Jutian 10 Absolutes pagoda, I have to tell you how I got this divine pagoda. This is the northernmost part of the ruins of God. 2 years ago there was news that someone found the entrance to the Yin-Yang secret realm. He explained everything to Jiku. Jiku was enlightened after hearing this. He nodded and said, I see. If that's the case, Big Brother Tianxing also entered this divine pagoda by chance. You only obtained a small golden pagoda. You can go in and out at any time, but you can't control this divine pagoda. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, not only can I not control it, but I can only explore up to the 6th floor. I haven't even been to the 7th floor. From your experience, you seem to be fated with this divine pagoda. You seem to have obtained some kind of inheritance. Seeing Jiku's complicated feelings, he said in a serious tone, Cuckoo, you have to remember those Yao clan's words. Study them at all cost. I have a feeling that those Yao clan's words might be related to the owner of this divine pagoda. You have to know that these 18 demon god statues are all monarch god level Yao clan experts. The owner of this divine pagoda is a godly king-level Yao clan expert who lives in the 33 grotto heavens. If you can really obtain its inheritance, you have a high chance of reaching the godly king level in this life and surpass your cultivation in your previous life. This huge surprise did not make Jiku dizzy. Instead, it made her even calmer. Chapter 2278. Jiku didn't waste any time. She memorized the messy demon language and symbols and engraved them in her soul. He would never forget them. Then she took out a jade slip and recorded over 100 pieces of information in it. Taking advantage of the fact that Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were both present to brainstorm, she handed the jade slip to them. Big Brother Tianxing, eldest senior sister, let's take a look together. What exactly are these words? Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao naturally wouldn't refuse. Both of them had profound knowledge and were proficient in the language and writing of the demon race. Of course, Yun Yao was only proficient in the demon language of this world. She wasn't as knowledgeable as Ji Tianxing. Both of them released their divine senses and invaded the jade slip to read the hundreds of messages one by one. After 15 minutes, Ji Tianxing recognized all the words and immediately revealed a joyful smile. It's just as Yao Yao expected. Jiku and Yun Yao both looked at him with anticipation. Do you understand the meaning of these messages? Ji Tianxing nodded and said with certainty, those are the demon language of the heavenly realm. They have been used for tens of thousands of years since ancient times and haven't changed much. Every message is a complete sentence. With hundreds of sentences piled together, of course it's very messy. However, as long as you understand the meaning of each sentence, you can reorder them. Most importantly, this was an incomparably profound deity technique. Although there are only hundreds of sentences here, I'm sure that this must be a godly king-level secret art. It contains incredible divine powers. Jiku and Yun Yao listened attentively and nodded slightly in agreement. Their eyes were filled with anticipation. Big Brother Tianxing, you've already understood those sentences. Do you know what cultivation technique this is? Ji Tianxing frowned and said regretfully, I've only read hundreds of sentences. I haven't recognized the name of the cultivation technique. Jiku quickly picked up the jade slip and recorded more than 300 sentences in it. Then he handed it to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing took the jade slip and looked at it carefully for an hour. Then he recognized the sentences and arranged them in a simple order. He looked up at Jiku and said with a smile, Found it. A few sentences are the general outline of the cultivation technique, and more than 20 sentences are the foundation of the cultivation technique. As for the name of the cultivation technique, it seems to be the immortal art or the 9 revolutions indestructible art. I'm afraid that I'll have to study it thoroughly to determine the name of this cultivation technique. When Yun Yao and Jiku heard, they both had puzzled looks. Immortal art? 9 revolutions indestructible art? Could it be a divine art of immortality? The name is quite exaggerated, but I keep feeling that it's weird. After all, the scene said demon. That flaming bird and a dozen demon immortals have all been killed. Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. He explained, even if you're a divine king and stand at the peak of the gods, you're not invincible. How can there be a true immortal in this world? Who can transcend the cycle of life and death? That's not something that can be achieved by cultivating a cultivation technique. But no matter what, with this cultivation technique, Cuckoo can benefit from it for the rest of your life. If you can comprehend it thoroughly with your talent and perseverance, you'll have a chance to become a divine king. Jiku collected his thoughts and said seriously, Big brother Tianxing, don't worry. I'll remember this cultivation technique and do my best to comprehend it. You've already helped me organize the general outline and the beginning of the cultivation technique. It's enough for me to comprehend it for a while and establish my foundation. Next, I plan to stay in the divine pagoda and comprehend and cultivate this cultivation technique. I know you guys still have important things to do. You've already been delayed for 2 months. It's not good to stay here. Hearing her say this, Yunyao was a little surprised. She asked, Aku, you're not leaving with us? Jiku shook his head and said, No, I've suddenly obtained such a great opportunity. Of course I have to cherish it and master this cultivation technique as soon as possible. Moreover, I'm already too far behind you guys. Even if I stay by your side, I won't be able to help you. Staying here to comprehend the cultivation technique is the best choice. Jiku's tone was firm. It was obvious that she had made up her mind. Although Yunyao felt that it was a pity, she could understand her feelings and didn't try to persuade her anymore. Ji Tianxing naturally agreed with her decision. However, he asked worriedly, Cuckoo, if we leave, how will you enter and exit this divine pagoda? If you're trapped here and can't leave, I'm afraid it'll be very inconvenient. Jiku shook his head and smiled. Don't worry. When I was asleep, I seem to have formed a strange connection with these 18 demon god statues. I can even use the heavenly star chain to open the Daluo divine formation under our feet. Ji Tianxing was relieved. He said earnestly, Cuckoo, you only have the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator now. If you master that cultivation technique, your strength will definitely increase exponentially. However, you can't trigger the heavenly tribulation in the divine pagoda. You have to go outside the divine pagoda. Also, you can't enter the divine pagoda. If you want to send a message, you have to go outside the divine pagoda. Jiku memorized all of it. Yunyao stayed behind and said something personal to Jiku. Ji Tianxing left the 5th floor and went to the 4th floor. The 4th floor of the divine pagoda was the divine sea. It was the place where he found little Blue Kuan. Standing on the endless sea, he opened the sword world and said to little Blue Kuan with his spiritual sense, Fathead fish, you've been making a fuss about returning to the divine sea. Now I'll fulfill your wish. After saying that, he released a majestic dermic power and grabbed little Blue Kuan from the sword world. He threw it into the divine sea. Plop. With a muffled sound, little Blue Kuan, which was as big as a mountain, smashed into the divine sea, splashing a huge wave hundreds of meters high. It quickly floated to the surface of the sea and looked up at Ji Tianxing with a confused expression. Above its head, a dense white dragon shadow was circling and dancing. It asked with a voice full of grievance, Master, what are you doing? We're cultivating a divine art. Ji Tianxing was secretly sweating. On the surface, he remained calm and said calmly, It's okay. You can cultivate here. I'm going to leave for a while. You can stay here at ease. Little Blue Kuan didn't feel that there was anything wrong. It circled the sea a few times and was very satisfied. The white dragon was a little worried and hurriedly reminded, Master, remember to pick us up when you're done. Don't forget about us. Ji Tianxing glanced at it and said angrily, Do I look like a forgetful person? After saying that, he left in a flash. Not long after, he returned to the 5th floor of the divine pagoda. After saying goodbye to Jiku, he left with Yunyao. Swoosh. In a flash, the two appeared on a barren mountain thousands of feet high outside the Yin-Yang mystic realm. Yunyao summoned the glazed fire dragon. The two stood on the dragon's back and flew to the south. Chapter 2279. In the heart of dark North Mountain. The 10,000-meter-tall sacred mountain was still shrouded by black clouds of demonic energy. The great demon Saint Ling Xian stood high in the sky, looking down at the sacred mountain and wasteland with a gloomy expression. On the wasteland that was riddled with holes, there were more than 200,000 demon commoners. They were like black ants that covered the ground, working hard. They were constantly transporting soil and sand from the distant mountains to fill the deep holes and ravines in the wasteland. There were also hundreds of warriors who had reached the primordial soul realm, working together to cast spells to repair the cracks in the ground. On the sacred mountain, there were also more than 100,000 demon citizens and craftsmen, repairing the cracks in the Sacred Mountain and rebuilding Dark North Palace and the Torture Department. Besides the craftsmen and citizens, demon warriors and guards could be seen everywhere. They were also busy. All in all, at least 300,000 demon citizens and warriors were working hard to rebuild the mountain. Moreover, this scene had already lasted for more than a month. According to the current progress, it would take about half a month to complete and restore the mountain to its original state. As the great demon saint Zhou Xian had not been able to rest for more than a month. Not only did he have to preside over the reconstruction work, he also had to deal with the affairs of the entire demon race. The more tired he felt, the more he hated Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Especially Luo Shui. He had come to Dark North Mountain twice, but both times he had destroyed Dark North Palace and almost destroyed the Sacred Mountain. As a result, the demon race needed a few months to recover. Every time he thought of this, Zhou Xian was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. However, although he was angry, he did not despair. If the Divine Mountain was destroyed, it could be repaired. If the Beiming Palace was destroyed, it could be rebuilt. Most importantly, the ancestor demon god had finally recovered to the god realm. This was the greatest support and backing of Zhou Xian and all the demon citizens. From now on, Dark North Mountain would have a demon god overseeing it. They would no longer need to hide in Dark North Mountain, nor would they need to worry about the invasion of the three divine kingdoms. Even though the ancestor demon god was still in seclusion to consolidate his foundation. But Zhou Xian believed that in at most a year, the ancestor demon god would be able to dominate the world and would not fear the three martial gods. At that time, Dark North Mountain would welcome true prosperity and glory. Thinking of this, Zhou Xian secretly clenched his fists, his eyes full of hope. He really hoped that day would come sooner. At this moment, a black shadow flew into the sky and arrived beside him. Shua. The pitch-black devil qi dispersed, revealing the figure of the third devil Saint Hetua. Zhou Xian glanced at him and asked casually, "Ba Tuo, have you finished rebuilding the outer walls and inner courtyard of Beiming Palace? When can we set up the defensive array?" Ma Tuo hurriedly replied, "The outer wall and the inner courtyard are about to be completed. We can start setting up the grand formation in 3 days at the latest. But that's not why I'm here. I just received a communication jade slip from the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation." As he spoke, Ba Tuo took out a jade slip and handed it over to Zhou Xian. "A message from martial god Tianju?" Zhou Xian frowned. He had a bad premonition. He reached out and took the jade slip. His divine sense entered it and read the information inside. A moment later, his face darkened and anger surged between his brows. Seeing his anger, Ba asked, "What's wrong? What did martial god Tianju say?" Zhou Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light. He sneered. What else could he say? Of course he was disappointed. He angrily questioned me why the plan failed again. At that time he sent a message to the ancestor wanting to make a deal with him. He wanted us to find a way to get rid of Ji Tianqing. So I used Yu to carry out this mission under the ancestor's instructions. I didn't expect Yu to fail. Then we used Aku to lure Ji Tianqing into the trap. In the end we failed again. When martial god Tianju found out about this, he sent a message to question me and even threw a fit at me. Ba Tuan nodded to show that he understood. He sneered and said, "Ha. We knew that Tianju wouldn't turn a deaf ear to it. However, he's really old and muddle-headed. He actually sent a message to reprimand you? Isn't this overstepping your authority?" Zhou Xian sneered and said in a mocking tone, "In the past our clan had no leader. We had to rely on the Tianju divine nation. So we listened to him. But now it's different. The ancestor has recovered his god realm. He's about to restore the glory and majesty of the death god. Martial god Tianju is still as arrogant as before. What a joke." Ba Tuo stopped smiling and said seriously, "However, the ancestor and martial god Tianju have an agreement. Our clan will need Tianju in the future. So we can't fall out with him now. You should think about how to reply to him." Zhou Xian nodded and waved his hand, "Go do your thing. I'll deal with this." Ba Tuo bade him farewell, then turned and flew away. After a while, Zhou Xian began to input a message into the jade slip. Then he waved his hand and sent out the jade slip. The jade slip turned into a dot of starlight and disappeared into the sky. Everyone wants Ji Tianqing to die, but who's willing to pay a huge price for it? Isn't that making a wedding dress for someone else? Ling Xian had a cold smile on his face as he muttered to himself. Tianju God Nation. In the magnificent, sacred and majestic divine palace. Yi Lushui hurriedly passed through the palace and entered the deepest part of the palace. He came to the door of a secret room. He tidied up his purple robe and combed his messy white hair. After making sure his clothes were neat, he bowed to the door of the secret room and said respectfully, "Subordinate Yi Lushui greets Lord God Lord. Please give me your orders." The wide and tall black stone door suddenly lit up with white light and formed a mirror-like light screen. A middle-aged man in a golden robe and a crown appeared in the light screen. It was martial god Tianju's projection. He frowned and his face was filled with anger. He scolded coldly, "Damn demon bastards. They're really a bunch of selfish and stupid trash." Hearing this, Yi Lushui immediately understood. Martial god Tianju was so angry and summoned him. It must be because of the demon race. As expected, martial god Tianju continued. "I sent a message to great demon Saint Ling Xian and asked why they haven't gotten rid of Ji Tianxing. But Ling Xian didn't apologize at all. Instead, his attitude became even more unyielding. He pushed the blame to Luo Shui and claimed that Ji Tianxing had Luo Shui's protection. The demon race couldn't do anything to him. If I want to get rid of Ji Tianxing, I have to think of a way myself. What a bastard. Does Ling Xian think that I'm in seclusion in the divine kingdom and don't know anything?" Chapter 2280. Martial god Tianju was unable to restrain his anger, and his words were filled with killing intent. Yi Lushui maintained a respectful attitude from beginning to end, and after listening to him he began to persuade him. "Lord God, please calm down, there is no need to be too worried. According to my investigation, Ji Tianxing did indeed bring Luo Shui to North Underworld Mountain, and both sides fought a great battle. Countless demon elites died, and North Underworld Mountain was almost destroyed, and North Underworld Palace was blasted into ruins. If not for the ancestor fiend god appearing in time to block Luo Shui, North Underworld Mountain would have been flattened by Luo Shui. The demon race suffered such a heavy blow, it is understandable that Ling Xian is angry." Hearing his words, martial god Tianju's anger dissipated greatly. Yi Lushui continued, "Ling Xian's tough attitude is probably related to the ancestor fiend god. I dare to guess that the ancestor fiend god has most likely recovered to the god realm. Otherwise, it would not have been able to block the attack of Luo Shui's true body." Martial god Tianju thought for a while and nodded slightly in agreement. Your analysis is very reasonable. No wonder Ling Xian's attitude changed. It is because he has confidence. However, the ancestor fiend god has just recovered to the god realm. His divine Dao foundation is definitely not stable, and he needs to cultivate for a few more years." Yi Lushui continued. "Therefore, in the next few years the ancestor fiend god will not personally deal with Ji Tianxing, unless he has enough confidence to kill Luo Shui." Martial god Tianju frowned and said with a gloomy expression, "Luo Shui was the first to come out of seclusion, and he is protecting Ji Tianxing with his life. It is indeed very troublesome. The ancestor fiend god will not make a move, and Ling Xian and Ma Tuo are trash. They cannot kill Ji Tianxing. It seems that if we want to get rid of Ji Tianxing, we will have to think of a way ourselves. I hate that I have been in seclusion for more than 200 years, and I am only one step away from attaining great success. I cannot waste all my previous efforts just to deal with Ji Tianxing. But if I don't make a move, who can successfully kill Ji Tianxing?" Martial god Tianju had many martial saints under his command, but no one was Ji Tianxing's match. Grand Divine Sun Yuanzhen was not powerful enough. The Lord of Sky City and the Governor of the Immortal Guards, Qin Zheng, had been killed. Yi Lushui held the Taiyin soul-severing ruler and personally went to assassinate Ji Tianxing, but it ended in failure. Martial god Tianju could not think of anyone else who could take on this heavy responsibility. At this moment Yi Lushui smiled confidently and said in a playful tone, "Divine Lord, don't worry. If you want to get rid of Ji Tianxing as soon as possible, I have a good plan." Martial god Tianju's eyes brightened. He asked with anticipation, "What good plan? Tell me about it." "The three hidden sects." Yi Lushui stretched out 3 fingers and said with a playful smile, "They are all ancient families that have existed for nearly 10,000 years and have long been forgotten by the world. However, they had a large number of martial saint realm experts and had mastered many lost secret techniques. They were the best candidates to assassinate Ji Tianxing. Even though they had always lived in seclusion and did not intervene in the disputes of the mortal world. However, we only need to pay a small price to get them to deal with Ji Tianxing. Hearing this, martial god Tianzhu sneered and nodded. That's right. The three hidden sects, how could I have forgotten about them? More than 3,000 years ago, before I established the Heaven and Divine Nation, the three hidden sects were the most powerful families in the continent. Among them, the Jiang family was good at formations and swordsmanship, the Helian family was good at refining magic treasures and elixirs, and the Tuoba family was good at rearing and controlling beasts. Back then, the three hidden sects lived in the Luna Star Cave and had many descendants. It was the beyond heaven strange land that their ancestors had created together. It could sustain the three hidden sects for tens of thousands of years. However, the Luna Star Cave was occupied by me. After the three hidden sects left, they lived in seclusion in the Fengling Mountain at the end of the North Sea. The last time I saw people from the three aristocratic families was 700 years ago. Now that hundreds of years have passed, I wonder how they are doing. They must miss their homeland and want to return to the Luna Star Cave even in their dreams. In fact, the Luna Star Cave was a place similar to the Heaven and Divine Nation. The Luna Star Cave was located in the heavenly wind-fire layer. The outside was the golden light barrier that sealed the world, and the inside was connected to the five elements world. After martial god Tianzhu took the Luna Star Cave, he used it as a palace or a place to relax and live in seclusion. In addition, the Luna Star Cave was rich in resources and spiritual qi. It was a holy place for cultivation. Normally, martial god Tianzhu's divine sons and divine daughters would often live in the Luna Star Cave and train there. Yi Lushui saw martial god Tianzhu nod in agreement, so he cupped his hands and bowed, saying, "Since you have no objections, I will do as you say. As long as you give the order, I will bring it to the North Sea's Fengling Mountain to discuss this matter with the three hidden sects. Even if they are angry, don't worry. As long as we are willing to return the Luna Star Cave to them, they will agree." Martial god Tianzhu nodded slightly and said in a dignified tone, "The Luna Star Cave doesn't mean much to me. It is just a place for the children to train. However, it means a lot to the three hidden sects. After all, it is a holy place left behind by their ancestors. As long as I am willing to return the Luna Star Cave, they will follow my instructions and try to kill Ji Tianxing." Martial god Tianzhu was silent for a moment. He thought for a while and suddenly shook his head, saying, "No, although this is a good idea, it is not perfect. I am running out of people to use. This is the last chance. We can only succeed, we cannot fail. If this plan fails, I will have to come out of seclusion and kill Ji Tianxing with my own hands." The smile on Yi Liushui's face froze. He asked respectfully, "What do you mean, Sir God Tianzhu?" Martial god Tianzhu looked at him with a solemn expression and said in a dignified tone, "The three hidden sects have many martial saints and they have mastered all kinds of secret skills. However, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is heavily guarded and Ji Tianxing is cunning. I am worried that the three hidden sects will not be able to break through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and kill Ji Tianxing. To ensure that nothing goes wrong, we need to change the plan. We need to lure Ji Tianxing out of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and deal with him somewhere else." Yi Lushui immediately listened attentively and said, "I would like to hear the details." Martial god Tianzhu smirked and said in a playful tone, 8 years ago, didn't you find a secret realm in the ruins of God? It might be martial god Nangong's cave dwelling, right?" Yi Lushui immediately guessed what he meant. His body shook and his expression changed drastically. "Sir God Tianzhu, do you mean we need to use the illusory space secret realm as bait? However, isn't the price too high? It took me decades of painstaking effort and sacrificed hundreds of guards to find that secret realm. Until now, we have spent countless manpower and resources, but we have not been able to enter the depths of the secret realm and obtain the treasures in it." Chapter 2281. The illusory sky secret realm was located in the depths of the godly ruins. It was hidden in a very hidden and dangerous ruin. Back then, Yi Lushui had spent dozens of years with hundreds of elites to find the secret realm. After a lot of exploration and research, he was sure that the illusory sky secret realm was most likely martial god Nangong's cave abode. Martial god Nangong was one of the overlords of the continent 8,000 years ago. He was best at forging divine weapons and artifacts. He had forged countless divine weapons and artifacts in his life. Throughout the ages, there was almost no one who could surpass him in the field of refining divine artifacts. However, no matter how powerful martial god Nangong was, he could not ascend. He could not escape the 10,000-year limit, so he could only turn into dry bones and yellow sand. About 4,000 years ago, martial god Nangong had reached the end of his life and passed away. No one knew when he died or where he died. Even the divine weapons and artifacts he had forged before his death never appeared again. From then on, martial god Nangong no longer existed in the world. Only his legends remained. Thousands of years had passed since then. There were very few people in the world who still remembered martial god Nangong. However, those who had heard of martial god Nangong's legends would yearn for it. Where were martial god Nangong's remains? Where were the divine weapons and artifacts he had forged, the endless resources and martial arts inheritances he had left behind? If one could obtain martial god Nangong's treasures, wouldn't they be the richest in the world and have a chance to become a god? Because of this, a small number of martial arts experts remembered martial god Nangong's legends and tried to find martial god Nangong's remains or cave abode. Yilushui was one of them. Not only was he powerful, but he also had the support of the Tianju divine nation. He had great power and could use endless manpower and resources. Therefore, he was the only one who had successfully found martial god Nangong's cave abode. In the past 8 years he had tried all kinds of methods to obtain martial god Nangong's treasures and used countless manpower and resources. However, in the end he did not make any progress. Other than entering the illusory sky secret realm, he could not enter martial god Nangong's cave abode, let alone the treasures and divine weapons. Yilushui had been waiting patiently. Only when martial god Tianju came out of seclusion could he open martial god Nangong's cave abode and take the divine weapons and treasures inside. However, he did not expect that martial god Tianju would give away the illusory void secret realm before coming out of seclusion. Currently, all information regarding the illusory void secret zone was kept confidential. Once this information was made public, it would definitely cause the entire Shenwu continent to boil over and countless powers would fight over it. Even the other 2 divine kingdoms would intervene. Yilushui was heartbroken. His heart was bleeding. Martial god Tianju saw Yilushui's strange expression and the pained look on his face. He comforted him. Yilushui, you don't have to be so worried. If I don't put in a lot of effort, how can I have full confidence? Tianxia must have heard about the legends of Nangong martial god. Now that he was in a precarious situation with enemies on all sides, he must urgently increase his strength. If he learns about martial god Nangong's cave abode, he will definitely be interested and come to explore it. Yilushui suppressed his heartache and nodded calmly. Divine Lord, you mean that we should release the news of the illusory sky secret realm to lure Tianxia to explore it? When that time comes, we'll gather the 3 great hidden sects and the martial saints of our country and join forces to kill him in the secret realm. Martial god Tianju nodded slightly and said solemnly, that's right. In order to not arouse Tianxia's suspicions, this news cannot be spread from our country. You have to find a way to spread the news from the Taihao Divine Kingdom or the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. When the news spreads, it will attract the martial saints of the various powers to rush to the ruins of God to explore it. When that time comes, you will personally lead the martial saints of our country and the 3 great hidden sects to the secret realm and wait for an opportunity to strike. At least a dozen martial saints will join forces to deal with Tianxia. Only then can we guarantee that nothing will go wrong. At this point, martial god Tianju looked deeply at Yilushui and exhorted, those who are rushing to explore the secret realm are all martial saints. It's basically impossible for them to enter the cave abode and obtain divine weapons and treasures. After this matter is over, chase the other martial saints away and close the entrance to the illusory realm. If the mission is completed successfully, I will return Luna Star Paradise to the 3 great hidden sects. Moreover, after I come out of seclusion, I will personally open Nangong Martial God's cave abode. I guarantee that Nangong Martial God's divine Dao inheritance and divine weapons will be given to you to help you break through to the divine realm as soon as possible. After receiving martial god Tianju's guarantee, Yilushui felt much better. He nodded solemnly and cupped his fists towards martial god Tianju and said, I understand. Rest assured, Divine Lord. I will do it now. At the latest, within 3 months there will be a result. Ji Tianxing will definitely die. Martial god Tianju exhorted in a solemn tone. Yi Lushui, you must remember that this is the last chance. You must not make any mistakes. If you fail again, Ji Tianxing will definitely take revenge. At that time you must not act on your own. You must be on guard. Only when I come out of seclusion will I personally kill him. Yes, Divine Lord. Yi Lushui cupped his fists and said goodbye to martial god Tianju. He then turned around and left. The light screen on the black stone door gradually dissipated. South of North Underworld Mountain 100 Origin City. In the majestic and dignified city master's mansion, and Yu was sitting in the meeting hall. On both sides of the hall, there were 2 rows of guards in black armor, a total of 16 people. The atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. And Yu's dignified gaze swept across everyone and said expressionlessly, 2 months ago Ling Xian's plan failed. I could not kill Ji Tianxing. Since then the agreement between me and the demon race has been put aside and has not been fulfilled. It seems that Ling Xian does not intend to give us the 500,000 demon race warriors that he promised. The facts have proven that the cunning and treacherous demon race is not trustworthy. We can only rely on ourselves to conquer this continent. The ancestor demon god has already recovered to the god realm. However, he still needs to rest in seclusion for a year to stabilize his power and realm. In other words, we only have less than a year left. After the ancestor demon god stabilizes his realm, the first thing he will do is to take back the 5 regions in the south and destroy us. Hearing this, the dozens of guards in black armor felt a great pressure and all of them clenched their fists. Everyone's eyes were burning with a scarlet flame, bursting with intense battle intent. And Yu continued, therefore, before the ancestor demon god comes out of seclusion, we must quickly occupy the 72 cities and move our foundation there. A few months ago I knew that Ling Xian was not reliable. Therefore, I did not expect him to send out 500,000 warriors for me to command. Since he is not giving, I will take it myself. Chapter 2282. And Yu's words made the 16 black-armored guards smile knowingly. The leader of the guards cupped his hands towards An Yu and began to report the news. Reporting to my lord, we have completed the mission you gave us 2 months ago. Now more than 300 tribal leaders and city lords in the 5 regions have been controlled by us using the soul-slaying mystic technique. These guys are absolutely loyal to us just like puppets. As long as we give the order, even if we ask them to assassinate the ancestor demon god, they will not hesitate. Very good. And Yu nodded in satisfaction and asked, then what about the cannon fodder I need? The leader of the guards reported again. Reporting to my lord, the vanguard army has finished preparing and is waiting outside 100 Origin City. From every tribe and city, we selected hundreds, even thousands of strong demon warriors. In total, there are more than 300,000 demons forming this vanguard army. Although their strength is weak, it is not a problem to use them to deal with the guards of the 72 cities. And Yu nodded again and revealed a gratified smile. And that is good. Those 300,000 demons are only cannon fodder. If we can successfully take over the 72 cities, they will not be afraid even if they die. Also, inform the others to speed up the progress of plundering resources. Although we have occupied the 5 regions in the south, the demon race will reclaim them in at most a year. Before that, we must plunder as many resources as possible. Not only to increase everyone's strength quickly, but also to refine more war souls. The leader of the guards nodded and said in a serious tone, I understand. Even if we use the demon warriors, they are only useless cannon fodder and will not be able to achieve anything. What can truly increase our strength and combat ability is still the war souls. However, each war soul puppet requires a large amount of resources and will take at least a few months to refine. The resources in the 5 regions in the south are somewhat barren and the resources that can be used by our race are even less. Up until now we have only refined 3 war soul puppets and are not able to use them. But rest assured my lord, I will make them speed up the process. And Yu nodded and said, each war soul puppet has the strength of a tribulation stage powerhouse and has great destructive power on the battlefield. If you can refine 200 war souls for me in half a year, I will be able to expand my territory and be invincible. Since Dark North Mountain is barren of resources, we should seize other territories as soon as possible. After saying that, Yu stood up and waved his hand. He ordered, "Guard captains, stay behind to take care of the affairs. The rest of you follow me to battle." The dozen or so black-armored guards bowed and accepted the order. Yu swung his dark red cape and strode out of the meeting hall. He boarded the black battleship. In the evening, the sun was about to set. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, making the palaces even more dazzling. At this moment, a dazzling flame flew over from the northern horizon, approaching at an extremely fast speed. Shwa! Soon, the golden and red flames arrived above the dojo of the Heavenly Pillar Mountain and came to a stop. After the flames subsided, it could be seen that it was a majestic and mighty glazed fire dragon. On the broad back of the divine dragon, a young man and woman stood side by side. They were both wearing white robes and white dresses. The travel-worn man and woman were Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Yun Yao kept the glazed fire dragon and stepped across the sky with Ji Tianxing. They landed in the dojo. A group of guards who were patrolling the dojo saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao and quickly bowed. Ji Tianxing nodded to the guards and rushed to the Pillar of Heaven's palace with Yun Yao. He did not need to ask to know that the Huanglong Taoist must be in the Pillar of Heaven's palace. After all, he had sent a message to the Huanglong Taoist before he went into seclusion in the Divine Pagoda. He believed that as long as there were no major accidents, the Huanglong Taoist would definitely follow his orders. 15 minutes later. The facts proved that Ji Tianxing's judgment was completely correct. He and Yun Yao returned to their room. They had just sat down to rest for a while when a guard's voice came from outside the door. "Young master, the Huanglong Taoist wishes to see you." Ji Tianxing smiled and ordered the guard outside the door, "Let him in." Then the Huanglong Taoist, who was wearing an apricot yellow Taoist robe and holding a fuchin in his hand, quickly stepped into the room. "Disciple greets master and mistress." Huanglong walked to the two of them and stood still. He bowed with a face full of joy. Ji Tianxing had already sent a message to him, saying that he was safe and sound. But in these 2 months Huanglong could not help but worry. He kept thinking about when his master would return. Now his master and mistress had finally returned safely. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and motioned for the Huanglong Taoist to get up. He asked, "Huanglong, did anything happen in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain in the 2 months that I was away?" Huanglong Taoist quickly shook his head and reported, "Master, I was full of worries at that time. It was only when I received your message that I was relieved. In these 2 months, I have been abiding by your orders and guarding the Pillar of Heaven's mountain firmly. I handled every matter carefully. Fortunately, there were no accidents or unforeseen events during this period." Ji Tianxing showed a gratified expression and reminded him, "That's good. I might not be in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain for a long time in the future. You have to guard our foundation well like before." "Yes, master." Huanglong Taoist quickly cupped his hands and bowed. Then he asked doubtfully, "Master, you and mistress have just returned. Are you going to leave again?" Ji Tianxing thought for a while and shook his head, "I have nothing to do in the near future. I will stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountain and will not go out again." In fact, he and Yun Yao had just finished their closed-door cultivation and their strength had increased tremendously. What they had to do next was to recuperate and stabilize their martial arts foundation. If there was a chance, they should participate in more battles to stabilize their foundation. Huanglong Taoist immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said expectantly, "Since that's the case, master and mistress, please rest first. When you are done recuperating, I will bring you to the Spiritual Herbal Garden and the Spirit Beast Garden to see the results of the modifications in this year. There are also many precious resources and mineral veins in our sect. Master, if you are interested, you can take a look and see what needs to be improved." Ji Tianxing thought that since he had nothing to do, he nodded and agreed. "All right, let's rest for 2 days first. We will patrol the day after tomorrow." Huanglong Taoist bowed and left after bowing. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao did not say anything else and went to meditate and recuperate. A day and a night passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao finished their rest. Both of them had changed into exquisite luxurious clothes and were in high spirits. They were waiting in the room. Today they were going to check on the Spiritual Herbal Garden and the Spirit Beast Garden with Huanglong Taoist. However, a guard's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Chapter 2283. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were stunned when they heard the guard's voice. The two of them looked at each other with a puzzled expression. Tianzhu Mountain had been peaceful recently. What could have happened to make the guard so panicked? Ji Tianxing said in a dignified tone, "Come in and talk." Then a guard in armor quickly stepped into the room and knelt down on one knee to salute. He cupped his hands and reporting to young master, there is news from the 72 cities in the north that they were attacked by a large number of demons last night and suffered heavy casualties. In just one night, 12 cities were breached and nearly 1 million warriors and civilians were slaughtered. Ji Tianxing frowned when he heard the news. A large number of demons attacked the 72 cities? 12 cities were captured in one night? Yun Yao also felt incredulous and asked doubtfully, "This shouldn't be. The demons were defeated a year ago and then suffered heavy losses. Their vitality has been greatly damaged. Isn't the demons recuperating now? Why did they suddenly send troops to attack the 72 cities?" The messenger guard didn't know much, so he could only shake his head and say, "Young master, madam, I just received the news from our scouts and came to report. As for the specific information and situation, I don't know." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "You can leave." The guard bowed and took his leave. He turned around and pushed the carriage away. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. He said in a low voice, "There must be something strange. Let's go and ask Huang Long." Then he walked out of the room with Yun Yao and rushed to Huang Long Daoist's study. Halfway through, the two of them bumped into Taoist Huang Long, who was in a hurry in one of the corridors. When Huang Long Daoist saw Ji Tianxing, he quickened his pace and greeted him. He cupped his hands and said, "Master, something happened in the 72 cities. I just received the news and was about to report it to you." Ji Tianxing stopped and nodded. "And I was just about to look for you. Let's talk somewhere else." Huang Long Daoist made a please gesture and said, "Master, please come to the conference hall. I have already gathered several elders to discuss countermeasures." Ji Tianxing looked at him and said with a smile, "You're quite thoughtful. You also understand the pros and cons." Huang Long Daoist bowed and said nothing. 100 breaths later, the three of them entered the main hall. 6 purple-robed elders had been waiting in the main hall for a long time, and they were whispering to each other as they discussed. Seeing that Ji Tianxing and Huang Long Daoist had arrived, everyone saluted and greeted them. Ji Tianxing led Yun Yao to the main seat and sat down. Huang Long Daoist sat on the left side of the main seat. The hall quieted down and everyone's eyes were focused on Huang Long Daoist. Huang Long Daoist said with a solemn face, "Just now, I received news from the scouts that a large number of demons appeared last night and attacked the 72 cities in the north. In just one night, 12 cities were captured and nearly 1 million people were slaughtered. As you can imagine, there must be a large number of demons and they were divided into several groups. I believe everyone knows that the 72 cities are located between Tianzhu Mountain and Baiming Mountain. It can be considered a buffer zone. Our Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the 72 cities are closely related. Now the demons have begun to invade the 72 cities. Once they succeed, their next target should be Tianzhu Mountain." Hearing this, the 6 elders nodded their heads in agreement. "That's right. Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold. We all understand that. We can't sit idly by and we can't let the demons wreak havoc. Yes. Even if we don't fight the demons, we must find a way to attack them. We can't let them successfully occupy the 72 cities. I think it's very strange. Aren't the demons seriously injured and recuperating?" Everyone reached a consensus without any discussion to help the 72 cities. However, one of the elders still raised a question. Ji Tianxing also asked Huang Long Daoist, "Huang Long, do you know how many demons there are? Who is the leader?" Huang Long answered without hesitation, "According to the information from the scouts, the number of demons is estimated to be more than 300,000. As for the leader, they didn't see the 2 notorious great demon sages. Instead, they found a huge black flying boat. In addition, there were several strange-looking powerhouses who appeared from the flying boat." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed and he suddenly understood. "As I expected, it's them." Yun Yao also nodded and said, "I see. It's actually in you and the other races who launched the attack. No wonder it's unexpected." Huang Long Daoist and the other elders were puzzled and asked, "Master, what's going on?" Ji Tianxing explained, There's a group of foreign invaders, about 80 of them, who drove a black warship and broke into the North Underworld Mountain. They only used 2 months to occupy the 5 southern regions of the North Underworld Mountain, ruling hundreds of tribes. The ancestor fiend god didn't come out of seclusion, and the 2 great demon sages couldn't do anything to them, so they could only compromise and retreat. Both sides even cooperated to deal with us. But their cooperation failed, and the ancestor fiend god also broke through to the god realm. Sooner or later he will drive away the other races and take back the 5 southern regions. So the other races can only take action in advance, vainly trying to occupy the 72 cities and make it their nest in the future. After listening to Ji Tianqing's explanation, Huanglong Daoist and the other elders were enlightened. The mastermind is actually the other races. Previously, I thought that the demon race's vitality was greatly damaged so they wouldn't attack again. I didn't expect the other races to be the ones stirring up trouble. Then it makes sense. In order to plan for the future, the other races can only pick on the weak ones and invade the 72 cities. After everyone discussed for a while, Ji Tianqing said in a serious tone, "Everyone is clear about the situation. Now I'll announce a decision. The 72 cities are being invaded by the other races, and we, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, can't sit by and do nothing. We have to help. Everyone must understand that this is not only to help the 72 cities, but also to prepare for a rainy day and protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. However, to be safe, everyone has to stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to prevent any accidents. I will personally go to the 72 cities and try to deal with the other races and the demon race's army." Huanglong Daoist and the other elders were worried and tried to persuade him. "Master, you can't go alone. It's too dangerous. Grandmaster, it's enough to have the great immortals stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. We're willing to go with you. The other races are ferocious and powerful. Grandmaster, you can't go alone. You have to bring a few more helpers." At this time Yunyao stood up and said firmly, "Everyone, you don't have to persuade me anymore. I'll go with Tianqing and fight against the other races together." Chapter 2284. At this critical moment Yunyao's words were still the most effective. The Huanglong Daoist and the elders immediately quieted down. Everyone weighed the pros and cons and nodded in agreement. As expected, they stopped persuading Ji Tianqing. This matter was settled. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He gave the Huanglong Daoist a few instructions and set off with Yunyao. The 2 of them walked out of the conference hall and came to the training hall. Yunyao took out a pendant and cast a spell to open the seal. Suddenly, a golden red flame bloomed and rushed into the sky. With a high-pitched dragon roar, a majestic glazed fire dragon that was thousands of feet long appeared in the sky above the training hall. The couple flew to the dragon's back and stood still. They rode the glazed fire dragon to the north and soon disappeared into the sky. The Huanglong Daoist and the elders stood on the training hall and bowed respectfully. After a long time they turned and left. It was only 1,000,000 miles from Tianzhu Mountain to the south of the 72 cities. With the glazed fire dragon's speed, it would only take 1 day to arrive. The next morning when the sun rose, the glazed fire dragon flew to the sky above Yuan City. This city was the southernmost city among the 72 cities. However, Yuan City was still considered peaceful. There was no obvious disturbance. Only after careful observation would one realize that the city was heavily guarded. A large number of city guards were guarding it. At the same time, the people in the city were also hiding in their homes. Very few people went out. The entire city was filled with an oppressive feeling as if a storm was about to come. Obviously, the people in Yuan City also knew about the invasion of the demon army. The demon army was still in the northernmost city, which was hundreds of thousands of miles away from Yuan City. However, the commoners were still in a state of panic. They were still extremely worried and terrified. The glazed fire dragon did not stop. It flew over the city and headed straight to the north. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao stood on the dragon's back and looked at the sky in the north. Their expressions were solemn. At this moment, a white stream of light flew from the sky. Swoosh! The stream of light stopped in front of Ji Tianqing, revealing a communication jade slip. Ji Tianqing reached out to take the jade slip and read the information in it with his spiritual sense. After a while he put away the communication jade slip and said to Yunyao, The scout sent a message. And you and the demon army are still attacking the city, but they have obviously slowed down their pace. In the past 1 day and 1 night, 4 groups of non-humankind guards led over 200,000 strong devil army to conquer 4 cities. So far, and you had conquered 16 cities. The commoners massacred by the fiend army were also close to 2 million. At least tens of millions of commoners became refugees and had no home to return to. They could only flee towards the south. The remaining tens of millions of civilians are unable to escape from those 16 cities. I wonder what kind of fate they are in now. After listening, Yunyao analyzed for a while and then asked doubtfully, "Strange, how many black-armored guards didn't you bring and how many demon soldiers did he lead?" Not only did he have to divide his troops to guard the 12 cities that he had just conquered, but he also sent 4 groups of guards and more than 200,000 strong devil army to attack the 4 cities. In this case, the demon army that he led was far more than 300,000 strong, at least 500,000 strong. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes. There should be 500,000 strong devil army, and the number of black-armored guards should be at least 30. The main force is attacking the cities at the front. The number of demons and black-armored guards guarding the cities should not be many. However, the people of the 72 cities are too useless. There are at least 2 million people in a city, but they are controlled by a few black-armored guards and 20 to 30,000 demons." Yun Yao did not agree and shook her head and said, "The fear of the commoners of the human race towards the demons is deep-rooted, and it is understandable. We have also fought with those black-armored guards, and each of them has the strength of a martial sage. 3 or 4 martial saints were indeed enough to guard a city. After all, the power of the 72 cities is very weak. Only 2 leaders are martial sages, and they have not been involved in worldly affairs for many years. The current city lords are mostly martial monarchs of the tribulation realm. How can they resist?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "I also understand this point, so we have to think of a way to kill those black-armored guards as much as possible. After we cut off and use claws and fangs, no matter how strong he is, he can't wantonly invade the territory." Yun Yao revealed a gratified smile and nodded, "That's right, and Yu is a martial god expert. We should try not to fight with him head-on and kill his guards first. Anyway, he has divided his troops and can't concentrate his forces. We can take them down one by one." The 2 of them agreed on a countermeasure and began to conserve their energy. Unknowingly, 10 hours passed. It was evening and the world was dark. The curtain of night was about to fall. The glazed fire dragon crossed dozens of cities and finally arrived at the north of the 72 cities. Not far ahead was the battlefield. The 2 cities within 50,000 kilometers had already been captured by the devil race. At this moment, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao saw that the sky in front of them lit up with flames. Vaguely, there was a loud rumbling sound which seemed to be the sound of an explosion. Seeing this scene, the couple looked at each other. "We're here. As we came at the right time. The demon army is attacking the city." Ji Tianqing stared at the area where the flames soared into the sky and observed carefully. It was a city with a radius of nearly 100 miles, and there were towering mountains on both sides. The city was located on a plain between the mountains. The city walls were built with huge brown rocks, and the palaces and pavilions in the city were mostly reddish-brown. That's Red Rock City. It was built 2,200 years ago and has been stable and prosperous for nearly 100 years. The population of the few small towns in and outside the city added up to more than 2 million. I vaguely remember that the current city lord seems to be martial monarch Shay. He has already passed the 6th tribulation. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows as he tried to recall. He explained the situation of the city to Yun Yao. Back then, when the Huanglong Taoist discussed the 72 cities with him, he had flipped through the information of the 72 cities. Although he had only seen it once, he had a photographic memory and memorized the basic important information. Soon, the glazed fire dragon flew above Red Rock City. Looking down from the night sky, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao immediately saw the situation in the city. They saw that the towering reddish-brown city walls were filled with armored soldiers guarding the city. A 5-colored light barrier with a radius of 100 miles protected the entire Red Rock City. However, that was only a tribulation-level array. It had long been shattered and riddled with holes. The city was originally very prosperous and rich. There were rows upon rows of houses, palaces, and pavilions. Most of them had red walls and golden tiles. The wide streets that extended in all directions were filled with towering trees on both sides. Most of them were red maple trees. At this time of the year, both sides of the streets were fiery red. The fallen leaves on the ground formed a carpet, which had a special meaning. Chapter 2285. Countless houses and buildings were blasted into smithereens, turning into a mess of ruins. The streets and alleys were all twisted and broken, filled with deep holes and cracks. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and martial artists were running and escaping in panic, letting out ear-piercing cries. Looking around, there were mangled corpses everywhere and wounded people screaming in pain. There were also pitiful people buried under the ruins with broken limbs. They could only moan helplessly. No one cared about them and no one could save them, because everyone else could not even save themselves. The entire Red Rock City was about to be destroyed by the flames of war and taken over by the demon race. Outside the city, 50 to 60,000 demon race soldiers had split into two black streams and were crazily attacking the two city gates. The soldiers defending the city were bathed in blood as they roared with all their might. Every moment there were many soldiers dying on the spot, lying in pools of blood. The city gates were quickly destroyed. The tall and majestic city walls were also blasted with holes, causing countless rocks to fall down. In the night sky there were hundreds of human experts and elites. They were split into several groups to defend against the assault of the demon race elites. These human experts were the generals defending the city. Some of them were from the noble families and some of them were from the city lord's residence. Even though they were wearing different uniforms and had split into several groups to defend against the invading enemies, they all had the same thoughts. However, they all held the same belief and were willing to sacrifice their lives in the face of death. Even though they had the advantage in numbers, the enemy only had a few dozen demon race experts and 5 strange-looking non-human guards. However, the battle was one-sided. The human experts and elites could not defend against the enemy's attacks. Their numbers were decreasing rapidly. Especially the 5 black-armored foreign race guards. They were invincible in Red Rock City. No one could harm them and they could casually use a secret technique to kill a large number of human martial artists and destroy many houses and buildings. With the current battle situation, in at most an hour the human elites would all die and Red Rock City would fall. The soldiers guarding the city, the people in the city, and the experts fighting in the night sky were all filled with despair. They could not defend against the invading enemies. Furthermore, no one would save them. At this moment, a scene that no one expected occurred. In the dark night sky, a bright flame suddenly lit up, and a dragon roar shook the 9 heavens. Ong! The deafening dragon roar seemed to have the power to pierce through metal and stone. It clearly spread over a radius of several hundred li, causing the fighting on the battlefield to stop. Both the humans and demons instinctively stopped their attacks and looked up at the night sky. In the next moment, everyone saw with their own eyes. A fiery red golden dragon, thousands of zhang long, appeared in the night sky. It coiled high up in the sky. It was extremely domineering. It opened its mouth and spewed glass golden flames that covered the sky and poured towards the southern city gates. The southern gate had just been breached by the demon race army. The human soldiers guarding the city gate had all died in battle. Thousands of demon warriors surged toward the city gate like a black tide. At this time, glass golden flames like a flood, whoosh. In an instant the glass into the sky, the golden glass. The reddish-brown stone walls and the broken city gates were immediately turned into lava by the flames. The ordinary demon warriors had no chance of survival. They were instantly burned to ashes by the glass golden flames. A total of more than 7,000 demons were annihilated before they could even let out a scream. Such a shocking scene caused all the experts in the night sky to reveal expressions of shock and awe. A moment later, when everyone came back to their senses, they had completely different reactions. The human experts excitedly cheered and shouted, "Heavens, a divine dragon has appeared. I never thought that a divine dragon would come to save us at this moment of life and death. The heavens bless Red Rock City. We are not fated to die." On the other side, the demon experts were shocked and furious, but they were also filled with confusion. They couldn't figure out who would interfere at this time and stop them from attacking. 5 black-armored non-human guards looked at each other and then exchanged a few words in the language of the Heaven Punishers. Immediately, 2 black-armored guards turned and flew toward the glass fire dragon to kill it together. However, when the 2 arrived in front of the glass fire dragon, they saw a young man and woman standing on the dragon's back. Both of them wore white. The man was handsome and heroic, and the woman was as beautiful as a fairy. They exuded an invisible sacred and majestic aura. The 2 black-armored guards were stunned for a moment. They quickly took out their long sabers and halberds and roared as they attacked. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 2 of them swung their long sabers and halberds, slashing out dozens of blood-red sabers and stabbing out hundreds of dark red sharp blades. The saber light and the sharp blade contained a soul-stirring murderous aura, erupting with an invisible soul-suppressing power. Xianxia was not afraid. He took out the sword of burial of heaven and instantly stabbed out 17 starry sword lights. Yunyao also took out 2 silver-white swords and slashed out dozens of silver crescent moons toward the 2 black-armored guards. She had given her reverse water divine sword to Luo Shui during the battle at North Underworld Mountain, and it was still in Luo Shui's hands. The 2 silver swords in her hands were only the sage-level silver moon swords, treasures of Luo Shan Mountain. Even so, it was more than enough to deal with the 2 black-armored guards. Bang 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 bang. The starry sword lights clashed with the dark red sabers, creating a series of muffled sounds as if thunder had exploded in the night sky. The sabers and sharp blades shattered and turned into shards that fell in the night sky. It was actually very beautiful. However, beneath the brilliance was a power that could destroy the heavens and the earth. More than a dozen starry sword lights struck the 2 black-armored guards, sending them flying backward on the spot. The armor on their shoulders and chests shattered and a few shards flew out. They mixed with blood and danced in the night sky. Xianxia and Yunyao left the dragon's back at the same time and chased after them to attack. Glass, you go and deal with the demon army. We'll kill the non-human guards. Yunyao used her divine sense to transmit her instructions to the glass fire dragon. The glass fire dragon let out a dragon roar and spat out flames again to kill the demon army outside the city gate. Even if some valiant demon army experts rushed into the night sky to assassinate it. It twisted its huge dragon body and swung its huge dragon tail, smashing those demon army experts into pieces and killing them on the spot. In a short span of 100 breaths, it killed the 20,000 demon army near the South City Gate, causing them to flee in all directions. Therefore, it hurriedly rushed to the North City Gate and released its glass fire to kill the demon army outside the city. At the same time, Xianxia and Yunyao had already killed the 2 black-armored guards. Chapter 2286. The martial sage realm black-armored guards were invincible against the soldiers and experts of Red Rock City. However, facing Xianxia and Yunyao, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. The 3 black-armored guards besieged the 2 of them and they fought fiercely in the night sky. However, after exchanging a few blows, the 3 black-armored guards were thrown out. One of them had his hooves chopped off while the other had his arm chopped off. Another black-armored guard had a hideous wound on his chest and his stomach had almost been cut open. After being severely injured, the 3 black-armored guards were horrified and fear grew in their hearts. They knew that they were no match for the 2 of them and they wanted to retreat. One of them waved his hand and made a hand seal, forming a mysterious dark red seal. Suddenly, the experts of the demon clan in the night sky charged toward Xianxia and Yunyao under the lead of a demon general. Xianxia and Yunyao were besieged and they had no choice but to use their sword skills to kill dozens of demon clan experts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 3 heavily injured black-armored guards silently flew across the night sky and fled towards the north. They only cared about escaping and did not care about the lives of the demon clan troops. Anyway, Inu had instructed them to prioritize their own lives if they were to encounter a strong enemy. The demon clan troops were cannon fodder and they were meant to be sacrificed. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Bam bam bam. Xianxia and Yunyao waved their swords and sword radiance filled the sky. It was as though the stars were shining and the moon was shining in the sky. After a short while, more than 40 demon clan experts were killed by the sword radiance and they were all dead. The 2 of them then turned their heads to look at the night sky in the north. Those three non-humankind beings actually abandoned tens of thousands of devils and fled for their lives alone? One of the black armored guards used a secret skill just now and the demon clan experts rushed over to cover their escape. If I am not wrong, they must have used a secret skill to control the demon clan experts. The two of them communicated through voice transmission as they chased after the black armored guards. Not long after, the two of them flew 3,000 miles and caught up with the three black armored guards. Piercing sword. Ji Tianxing fiercely stabbed with the sword of burial of heaven, and a cold light flashed in the night sky. In the next moment, the cold light pierced through the back of a guard and destroyed the dark red scale armor on his chest. Boom. Amidst the deafening noise, cold light blossomed like a mushroom cloud, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. The corpse of the black armored guard was also blown to pieces, turning into a rain of blood that sprinkled down. Astral wind, heavenly fire. Yun Yao also shouted and waved her silver moon dual swords, sending out two dazzling sword lights. One was a blazing white astral wind sword, while the other was a dark red heavenly flame sword. Both were more than 10,000 feet long. Clearly, she had mastered these two powers after refining the wind-fire deity bead. Bang bang. With a muffled sound, the two giant swords struck the two black armored guards. The two of them suffered heavy injuries once again. One of them was almost cut in half at the waist, while the other had half of his body severed. The violent impact sent the two of them flying. Swoosh. Ji Tianxing teleported and chased after them. He waved his sword and shattered the scale armor on the chest of one of the guards. Yun Yao followed closely behind. She held her two swords and pierced the chest of the other guard. At this point, the two black armored guards died on the spot and fell into the mountains below. Yun Yao wanted to use her astral wind and heavenly fire to destroy the corpses of the two guards. Ji Tianxing waved his hand to stop her. He landed in the mountains and personally checked the corpses of the two guards. After a while he took their interspatial rings. Then he waved his hand and sent out a flame to burn the corpses to ashes. Yun Yao saw him holding the two black rings and looking at them carefully. She asked, "Tianxing, are you trying to find clues from their belongings? But we don't know anything about their language and writing." Ji Tianxing put away the two rings and said with a smile, "It's okay. Just because we don't know anything now doesn't mean we won't know anything in the future. It's always good to be more careful. I'll look into it when I have time." After saying that, he turned around and flew back with Yun Yao. After a while, the two of them returned to the sky above Red Rock City. At this point, the war was coming to an end. 80% of the demon army outside the north and south city gates had been killed by the glass fire dragon. There were only a few thousand soldiers left and they were utterly defeated. They fled north in a panic. The glass fire dragon chased after them mercilessly. The thousands of soldiers of Red Rock City followed closely behind. Within Red Rock City, the citizens who had survived the calamity cheered and cheered. In the night sky, a white-haired elder in golden armor and a purple cape was commanding the city guards to clean up the mess and save the injured. This person's face was covered in blood and his body was covered in wounds. His aura was also very weak. However, he gritted his teeth and endured his injuries. He refused to heal himself and had to take charge of the situation. This was because he was the current city lord of Red Rock City, the Sand Martial Lord. Although the war was won and Red Rock City was saved, hundreds of thousands of people died. However, hundreds of thousands of civilians died tragically in the war, and tens of thousands of houses and buildings were destroyed. Even the number of survivors numbered in the tens of thousands. All of these needed to be dealt with. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao stood side by side in the night sky and looked down at the situation of the entire city. Seeing that the remaining demons in the city had been cleared and that the rescue and cleanup work had begun, the two of them were completely relieved. At this time, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord brought more than 30 human experts with wounds all over their bodies and arrived in front of the two of them. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao with burning eyes and bowed gratefully. "Thank you, benefactors, for saving our lives," everyone said in unison. Their tone was sincere and emotional. Then the Sand Martial Lord took 2 steps forward and bowed deeply to Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. "I am Sand Yi, the City Lord of Red Rock City. Here, on behalf of the 2 million people, I would like to thank the 2 benefactors for saving our lives. If not for the 2 benefactors bringing the divine dragon to save us, Red Rock City would have been occupied by the demons long ago. This old man and hundreds of thousands of people would have died in the flames of war. This old man will never forget such great kindness. Red Rock City will never dare to forget it. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao nodded slightly and raised their hands to signal for the Sand Martial Lord to stand up. However, the Sand Martial Lord maintained his bowed posture and asked respectfully, "This old man is muddle-headed. I have yet to ask for the names of the two benefactors so that the people can remember them in their hearts." The more than 30 experts also nodded and echoed, their expressions filled with anticipation. Ji Tianxing looked at the Sand Martial Lord and said calmly, "I am Ji Tianxing. I believe you should have heard of me. This person beside me is my wife Yun Yao, the goddess of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom." Suddenly hearing his two sentences, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord as well as many nobles and experts, all widened their eyes, revealing deep shock. Everyone was stunned for a moment before coming back to their senses. Immediately they began to discuss excitedly and exclaim, "Oh my God! It's actually the famous young master Tianxing, the #1 genius of the continent, the leader of Pillar of Heaven's Mountain." Chapter 2287. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the nobles and experts of Red Rock City were all immersed in excitement. No one had expected that the one who saved them at the critical moment would be the famous Ji Tianxing. His name had already spread throughout the Shenwu continent and could be said to be a household name. Especially when countless people found out that he might be the reincarnation of Kenshin, their admiration and reverence for him reached the peak. After a long time, everyone's emotions calmed down. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord bowed respectfully and said, "Young Master Ji, Madam Ji, this old one humbly asks the two of you to stay in Red Rock City for a few days. Since the two of you have saved Red Rock City, this old one and all the citizens of the city would like to act as hosts and entertain the two of you well to express our gratitude." After he finished speaking, more than 30 experts also bowed in unison and earnestly asked Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao to stay. Ji Tianxing naturally understood their intentions. They were so cordial not only to express their gratitude but also to rope in their backers. After all, if he and Yun Yao stayed in Red Rock City, the city would be safe and the demonic army would not dare to invade again. However, Ji Tianxing refused without hesitation and said with a calm expression, "We appreciate everyone's good intentions, but saving Red Rock City is just a small matter and is not worth mentioning. Now that the demonic army is wreaking havoc, the other cities are in danger and millions of citizens are homeless. We still have to go and save the other cities, so how can we delay in Red Rock City?" Since he had made it clear, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the other experts could only give up on the idea. Young Master Ji is right. This old one was muddle-headed and did not think of this. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord laughed self-deprecatingly and said with a face full of admiration, "Young Master Ji is so benevolent and willing to save millions of citizens. It is really the blessing of the 72 cities and the people of the world." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say anything else. He and Yun Yao crossed the night sky and flew onto the back of the glazed fire dragon. They were about to turn and leave. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the other experts hurriedly bowed and said in unison, "We respectfully send off young Master Ji and Madam Ji." Everyone maintained a respectful posture and watched the glazed fire dragon disappear into the horizon before they stood up one after another. Sigh. "It's such a pity that I couldn't make young Master Ji stay, even if it was just for a banquet. Actually, we should have thought of this long ago. Young Master Ji is a godlike figure. Why would he stay in the small Red Rock City? Young Master Ji is benevolent and virtuous. Obviously, he is here to resolve the crisis of the 72 cities and resist the army of the Devil Clan. For a godly person like young Master Ji, it is already a great fortune for us to be able to witness his true appearance. How can we ask for more?" Everyone discussed regretfully for a while before dispersing. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao towards the northwest. Ji Tianxing clearly remembered that there was a city 40,000 li to the northwest of Red Rock City. It was an ancient city with more than 2,000 years of history. Its scale, population and power were slightly stronger than Red Rock City. That city was called Tong'an City. Ji Tianxing guessed that since Red Rock City was attacked by the Devil Clan, Tong'an City would not be spared either. 2 hours later, the glazed fire dragon arrived at Tong'an City. The facts proved that Ji Tianxing's guess was right. The originally peaceful Tong and city had just experienced a war. When the glazed fire dragon arrived, the war seemed to have just ended. The ancient city with a radius of 200 miles was a scene of devastation and disorder. The ground outside the city was cracked and filled with holes. There were also many corpses and armor fragments scattered around. The east and west city gates were breached and the city walls collapsed, turning into a pile of rocks. The ancient city was originally filled with buildings, streets, and courtyards. It was a peaceful and elegant scene. However, the city was now in ruins. The streets were twisted and broken and the houses collapsed. There were flames and thick smoke everywhere. Countless corpses of humans were strewn on the ground or lying in pools of blood. Dark red blood dyed the ground and ruins red. It even formed small streams that spread silently on the ground. Groups of sturdy, ferocious-looking demon warriors had been flying around the city in a hurry, with sabers, spears, swords, and halberds in their hands. Large groups of human beings were huddled together helplessly, with ragged clothes and bodies dyed in blood. They were all helplessly and pitifully squeezed together, being guarded by demon warriors. The people did not dare to cry loudly. They could only sob softly. Everyone suppressed the fear and despair in their hearts, shivering in the darkness and coldness. There were still small-scale battles happening in various parts of the city. The Devil Clan warriors who were unwilling to submit or wanted to escape fought the Devil Clan with all their might. However, they were only mercilessly suppressed and died on the spot. The city lord's mansion at the center of the city had already been taken by the Devil Clan experts. The city lord's mansion was also in ruins. It had clearly been through a great battle. Corpses and blood could still be seen on the ground. The mansion was brightly lit and screams and wails could be heard. Obviously, the Devil Clan was killing the Devil Clan warriors and guards who were stubbornly resisting. All in all, Tong and city had been taken over by the Devil Clan army. Chapter 2288. The city lord's residence was heavily guarded. At least 1,000 demon race warriors wielding sabers, spears, swords, and halberds guarded the various passageways and gates. Thousands of human martial practitioners squatted on the empty ground in the front yard and plaza. These people were the guards and servants of the city lord's residence. They were all covered in wounds and stained with blood. They looked miserable and wretched. Originally, there were more than 3,000 people in the city lord's residence. More than 2,000 of them had been killed in the previous battle. These people were both survivors and captives. They had been chased to the front yard and plaza by the demon race warriors and squeezed together. More than 200 murderous demons stood around them, closely watching over these captives. The fate of these captives would depend on the outcome of the negotiations in the city lord's residence. The discussion hall of the residence was covered in corpses and blood. The air was filled with the thick stench of blood. 5 non-humankind guards who were wearing black armors and had 4 hooves stood in the front with their heads held high, looking down at those human warriors in the hall. There were more than 20 human martial practitioners, all of them experts above the primordial soul realm. Among them was the purple-robed, dignified Tong and city lord. There were also armored generals guarding the city, as well as many nobles dressed in luxurious clothing. Of course, their disheveled hair and bodies covered in blood made them look miserable and pitiful. Many of them were heavily injured with broken limbs. They constantly groaned in pain. The leader of the foreign race guards was followed by a demon general. Under the orders of the foreign race guards, the demon general approached the Tong and city lord and shouted in the demon language. "You only have 2 choices now. Either you surrender and submit to us, or we massacre the city and kill everyone in it. Our lords have limited patience. You only have 10 breaths to consider." Tong and city was not far from North Underworld Mountain and had more than 2,000 years of history. Therefore, the Tong and city lord and the nobles all knew the demon language and writing. When the crowd heard the angry shout of the demon general, they trembled in anger, their hearts filled with humiliation and anger. The white-haired Tong and city lord held his severed left arm with his right hand. His blood-stained face constantly changed. He was weighing the pros and cons as he struggled fiercely. He was unwilling to submit to the demons, but he also did not want the 700,000 people in the city to be slaughtered. Caught between a rock and a hard place, there was no choice. Soon 10 breaths had passed. The demon general approached again and looked down at him from above. He asked in a deep voice, "Time's up. Since you can't make a choice, then let the entire city be buried with you." As he spoke, the demon general pulled out his saber and slashed at the head of Tong and City Lord. The two of them were too close to each other, and Tong and City Lord was severely injured, so there was no way for him to dodge. It looked like he would die under the saber of the demon general, dying on the spot. Just at this critical moment, a dazzling silver light suddenly flew in from outside the door. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the silver light was like an arrow, crossing several dozen feet and piercing through the demon general's forehead. Boom! With a muffled explosion, a bloody hole appeared on the demon general's forehead, from which purple blood spurted out. His burly body, which was more than 10 feet tall, was also sent flying backwards by the powerful impact. He flew backward for a full 10 feet before crashing into the wall with a muffled dong sound. When he landed, he was already a corpse, rolling to the feet of a foreign race guard. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to be stunned for a moment. The 5 foreign race guards frowned and looked outside the door with sharp eyes. The city lord of Tong and City and the 20 or so nobles and masters were also looking at the door with suspicion and anticipation. In the next moment, a young man and woman in white robes stepped into the hall with swords in hand. Everyone's eyes lit up and they could not help but praise in their hearts, "What a pair of peerless beauties." The white-robed man was handsome and heroic, and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. He exuded a mysterious and powerful aura that made people look up to him. The white-robed woman was beautiful and otherworldly. She was as pure and elegant as a goddess from the 9 heavens, and her every move was natural. The two of them stepped into the hall with their swords pointed to the ground. On the ground behind them, purple blood dripped from the tips of their swords, forming a line on the ground. Everyone instinctively looked outside the door and saw countless demon corpses lying on the steps and in the front yard. It was clear that all the demons outside the door had been killed. The city lord of Tong and City and the human race experts were pleasantly surprised by this scene. The faces of the 5 foreign race guards darkened. They all gripped their swords and halberds tightly as they stared sharply at the newcomers. Suddenly, the leading foreign race guard thought of something, and his expression changed drastically. His eyes widened in shock. He instinctively pointed at Ji Tianxing and shouted in the language of the Heaven Punishers, "It's him! He's Ji Tianxing!" The other 4 foreign race guards did not recognize Ji Tianxing. After their companion's reminder, the 4 of them realized who Ji Tianxing was. Their expressions changed drastically and they became very wary. "It's Ji Tianxing. The guy who gave the captain such a headache? Damn it! Wasn't he at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Why would he be here?" Everyone, don't panic. Although he's very powerful, the 5 of us can definitely defeat him if we work together. The few foreign race guards communicated telepathically. It was obvious that they were not confident. Soon Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao walked to the center of the hall and stood still. The two of them stared coldly at the 5 foreign race guards. They slowly raised the swords in their hands, and a murderous aura surged from their bodies. At the same time, Ji Tianxing said without even turning his head, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave this place." Of course, this sentence was directed at Tong and City Lord and the others. Everyone regained their senses and hurriedly got up from the ground. They supported each other as they ran toward the door. Seeing that the demons outside the door were all dead, everyone became excited and sped up to escape the city lord's residence. At this moment, the 5 foreign race guards roared angrily. They waved their swords and charged toward Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Their swords, spears, swords, and halberds created a sky full of red light. It was like thousands of sharp blades and sword shadows, filling the entire hall. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were surrounded by the dark red light blades. They were surrounded, but they were not afraid. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The two of them waved their swords at the same time. Hundreds of starry sword rays formed a sword formation and attacked in all directions. Bam, 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 bam. The sword rays collided with the sky full of red light blades. There was a series of deafening explosions. The destructive shockwave exploded on the spot and destroyed half of the city lord's residence. The meeting hall and dozens of houses and palaces around it were all blown to pieces and scattered in the night sky. The earth shook violently and numerous cracks appeared on the ground. Chapter 2289. The two sides only exchanged one blow, and the entire city lord's mansion was destroyed. Even half of Tong and city started to shake as if there was an earthquake. The citizens who were already in despair became even more panicked when they saw another battle in the city. The demon race warriors who were patrolling and suppressing the citizens were also filled with doubts and worries. They hurried to the city lord's mansion to check on the situation. However, when thousands of demon race warriors approached the city lord's mansion, they were sent flying by the violent shockwaves before they could see the situation clearly. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao joined forces to fight against the 5 alien race guards. They fought fiercely in the sky above the ruins. The two sides fought fiercely using all kinds of secret techniques. The dazzling sword light and the radiance of spells were like stars and the bright moon, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. It was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. The destructive shockwaves spread out like waves, engulfing half of Tong and city. Those who were closer to the city lord's mansion, no matter if they were demon race warriors or human citizens, were killed by the shockwaves. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the shockwaves from the Battle of Martial Sages were too powerful, and they attacked indiscriminately. In just 10 breaths, the 5 alien race guards were sent flying. All of them were injured to different degrees. They were covered in blood, and those who were seriously injured had their arms or legs chopped off. With their strength, they could not fight against Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao head-on. However, they were still unwilling to give up. Ignoring their injuries, they roared and charged again. After a few moves, they were sent flying again by the sword light. They drew arcs in the night sky and fell outside the city while screaming. 2 of them were more unlucky. While they were still flying in the sky, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao caught up with them and pierced through the scales on their chest. After fighting so many times, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao had already figured out each other's weaknesses. That was why they could kill them so quickly. The 2 unlucky alien race guards exploded on the spot. They fell to the ground and turned into a pile of debris. They died just like that. The other 3 had witnessed the tragic death of their companions. They were filled with grief and indignation, but they were also filled with fear. They realized how terrifying Ji Tianxing was, and their fighting spirit disappeared. They didn't dare to stay any longer. Swish, swish. The 3 of them turned around and flew away without hesitation. They turned into dark red lights and pierced through the night sky, heading straight for the north. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao would not show any mercy. Naturally, they would hunt him down with all their might. 100 breaths later, the 2 parties had chased each other for 1,000 miles before flying into a mountain range. Yun Yao executed her ultimate sword technique and killed an alien guard on the spot. Ji Tianxing unleashed 2 of his ultimate skills and killed 2 non-humankind guards one after another. At this point, the 5 foreign race guards who had invaded Tong'an City were all killed. It was a bit of a pity that the 2 foreign guards had managed to send out 2 transmission jade slips before their deaths. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao put away their swords and flew towards Tong'an City. While they were on their way, the 2 of them communicated with their divine consciousness. We don't have to guess. They sent out the transmission jade slips with all their might. They must be reporting to you. It doesn't matter. We can't hide the news anyway, and you will know about it sooner or later. If Yu knows that we are involved in this matter, he will not be able to eat or sleep in peace. He will try to get rid of us first. But I would like to see if the 2 of us can kill him if we work together. Soon the 2 of them flew back to Tong'an City. While they were still far away, the 2 of them saw the glazed fire dragon wreaking havoc in the city. It was chasing after the defeated demon warriors. It twisted its mountain-like dragon body and killed a bunch of demons with a wave of its dragon claws. With a sweep of its dragon tail, it turned hundreds of demons into dust. In front of it, those Soul Refinement Realm and Primordial Soul Realm demons were as weak as ants. If more than 30,000 demons gathered together, it could kill them all in 15 minutes. However, those demons were divided into dozens of teams and scattered around the city. No matter how strong it was, it would take a long time to kill them all. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao also joined the battle. They split up and killed the remaining demons. The city lord of Tong, and city and more than 20 experts regained their confidence and hope. They led a large group of human warriors to surround the escaping demons. The battle lasted for an hour before it ended. More than 90% of the 30,000 demons that invaded Tong City were killed. Only a little more than 1,000 managed to escape. Tong City finally calmed down. The hundreds of thousands of humans who were lucky enough to survive all cheered excitedly. The city lord of Tong City quickly ordered the city guards and human experts to help the injured and clean up the ruins. While dealing with the aftermath, he forced himself to endure his heavy injuries and personally expressed his gratitude to Ji Tianxing. With his experience in Red Rock City, Ji Tianxing did not want to waste time and did not reveal his name. He casually said a few words and was about to send the city lord of Tong City away. However, one of the nobles beside the city lord of Tong City stared at Ji Tianxing for a long time. When Ji Tianxing was about to turn and leave, he mustered his courage and shouted, "Young Master Ji, please wait." Ji Tianxing subconsciously turned to look at him and asked with a frown, "Is there anything else?" The nobleman was overjoyed. He cheered excitedly, "Ha! You're Ji Tianxing, Prince Ji Tianxing. I'm not seeing things. This is too unbelievable. Young Master Ji actually came to Tong City and personally saved us." The city lord of Tong City was also stunned. After a long while he regained his senses and muttered, "Young Master Ji Tianxing? The leader of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, the #1 genius of our race? The reincarnated young Master Ji of Kenshin? Oh my god. Is this real? We are so honored." The city lord of Tong City was also so excited that his blood was boiling and his face was flushed red. He and the noble were about to kneel down and bow to Ji Tianxing to express their gratitude. However, when they turned around they realized that there was no one in front of them. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao had already left. Even the golden-red glazed fire dragon had disappeared. The huge surprise and excitement was immediately replaced by a deep sense of regret and disappointment. The two of them stood there in a daze and looked at the night sky in the north for a long time before leaving. Dawn was approaching. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao across the sky and rushed to the next city. Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianxing beside her and joked with a smile, "I didn't expect your reputation on the continent to reach such a level. Even if you hide your name, there are still people who can recognize you and worship you so fervently." Ji Tianxing shook his head and chuckled, "The 72 cities are close to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It's not surprising that they know of my name and deeds. Most importantly, they had just been invaded by the demon race's army, and their families had almost been destroyed." Chapter 2290. 4 hours later. The sun rose from the east and shone down warm sunlight. The glass fire dragon carried Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao and was about to reach Bay City. This city was closer to the north than Red Rock City and Tong City. It was also closer to North Underworld Mountain. Therefore, Ji Tianxing had reason to believe that this city had been attacked as well. Or perhaps, Bay City had already been occupied by the foreign race guards and the devil race. Soon, the glass fire dragon crossed a mountain range that was 10,000 feet tall and arrived above Bay City. It was as Ji Tianxing had expected. Bay City had just experienced a huge battle last night. The pitch-black stone city walls were in shambles and had more than 10 holes in them. The city was in a mess. There were broken walls, collapsed houses and ruins everywhere. The ground was filled with cracks and holes. Corpses were piled up everywhere. Even the soil was dyed dark red. There were thousands of devil race warriors guarding the stone city walls. Above the city, there were hundreds of devil race experts patrolling and monitoring the surroundings. There were also large groups of devil race warriors shuttling back and forth in the city. They looked like they were in a hurry. But this was not the main point. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's gazes landed on the sky above Bay City. There was a huge black battleship floating in the sky. Ji Tianxing had seen that sharp, cold, and mysterious battleship many times. He could recognize at a glance that it was an Yu's battleship. Immediately, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao frowned. Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a playful sneer. "Previously we were still saying that and you would definitely think of ways to get rid of us. I didn't expect that we would be so lucky to meet him in the blink of an eye. Yunyao nodded and said calmly, "It's just that his battleship is here. It doesn't mean that he's here too. If he's really here, then let's have a battle with him and see how capable he is." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said in a resentful tone, "Last time at North Underworld Mountain the ancestral demon god took action, and we did not have the chance to fight within you alone. Now that our strength has increased by several times, and you is alone here without the help of the ancestral devil god, this is the best chance to get rid of him." As they spoke, the two of them rode on the glazed flame dragon and sped up towards Anbei City. As soon as the glazed fiery dragon arrived above the city gate, the hundreds of dark demons who were hovering above the city rushed over with murderous intent. Those demon clansmen looked ferocious as they roared and cursed. They crazily swung their weapons and besieged Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. Thousands of saber lights and sword shadows, as well as purple or blood-red spell shadows, poured down like a torrential flood. Ji Tianxing and Yunyao were not afraid at all. They did not even have the slightest intention of retreating. Ji Tianxing took out the sword of burial of heaven and swung it expressionlessly in the face of the demonic light that blotted out the sky. Swoosh! A starry sword light that was more than 10,000 feet long like a crescent moon, with the power to destroy everything, struck the sky full of light. Kaboom! In that instant an earth-shattering explosion rang out, spreading across a radius of several hundred kilometers. The sword shadows and demonic light that filled the sky instantly collapsed, turning into fragments of light that filled the sky. The extremely violent impact wrapped around the billions of fragments of light, forming a half-purple, half-red shockwave that swept through the hundreds of dark demons. Bam! 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 A series of muffled booms erupted, reverberating in the sky endlessly. All the dark demon warriors that were hit by the shockwave spewed blood from their orifices. Their bodies shattered as they screamed and flew back. The stronger ones and the luckier ones managed to keep their lives, while the heavily injured ones fell into the city. Most of the dark demons were smashed to pieces, dying on the spot. Ji Tianxing only used one move to clear the sky, instantly killing hundreds of dark demon warriors. Such a shocking scene caused the tens of thousands of dark demons in the city to reveal inexplicable expressions of shock. The human civilians who were holed up in the ruins or under the watch of the dark demons also witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Everyone was wild with joy, letting out excited cheers. "Everyone look! There's a divine dragon in the sky. A divine dragon has appeared. Finally, an otherworldly expert has come to save us. Oh my God, am I dreaming? Could it be that the heavens have sensed our prayers and sent a god to save us? Did you see that? There's a man and woman in white on the back of the divine dragon. They're the ones who killed those dark demons. What a perfect pair. They actually came riding a divine dragon. They must be gods, right?" The human civilians who were in desperate straits saw the glazed fire dragon and Ji Tianxing and his wife, and their hope was immediately rekindled. As a result, the people were so excited that they all regarded Ji Tianxing and his wife as gods, saviors of the world. After all, there were only a handful of experts who could ride a divine dragon in the sky. The civilians had never seen it before and had only heard of similar myths and legends. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's sword had broken through all techniques and killed hundreds of dark demons in an instant. This was even more heaven-defying. At the same time, thousands of dark demons flew out of Anbei City and charged towards the glazed fire dragon from all directions, wanting to intercept Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. These dark demons seemed to have gone crazy. With the mentality of facing death unflinchingly, they used their most powerful trump cards with all their might. Even if they died on the spot, they had to stop the glazed fire dragon. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianxing and Yunyao made their moves at the same time. They used their incomparably marvelous sword techniques and powerful ultimate techniques to resist the siege of the numerous devils. Bang, 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 bang. A series of explosions sounded in the sky. The area within 50 kilometers was filled with chaos. It was filled with demonic light and all kinds of shadows. No one could see Ji Tianxing and Yunyao's figures. They could only hear the continuous loud explosions mixed with the high-pitched dragon roars. Many human civilians looked up at the sky. Their hearts were in their throats and they were extremely worried. Finally, 10 breaths passed. The Dharma spells and shadows that filled the sky dissipated. Only then did the glazed fire dragon's figure appear. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were still standing on the dragon's back. They looked unscathed. On the other hand, the thousands of dark demon warriors had long been slaughtered. Almost all of them were dead or injured. Seeing this, the human commoners felt as if a heavy stone had been lifted from their hearts, and they cheered excitedly once more. But at this moment, the black battleship floating in the sky suddenly opened its door. A tall and mighty figure appeared. This was a man with 4 hooves. He wore silver armor and a fiery red cloak. There was a treasured sword hanging from his waist. 2 black-armored guards followed him to the deck and stood still. They looked down at the glazed fire dragon from above. The silver-armored man's scarlet eyes locked onto Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. After seeing the 2 of them clearly, he immediately revealed a cruel and sinister smile. He said in the dark demon language, "Ji Tianxing, there's a path to heaven but you don't take it. There's no door to hell but you barge in." Chapter 2291. Without a doubt, the man in silver armor was in Yu. Last night he had personally piloted the battleship and brought 8 black-armored guards to attack in Bay City. From the start of the battle until now he had stayed in the battleship and had not shown his face. After all, there was no need for him to deal with a weak force like in Bay City. He just needed to send a few black-armored guards and 40,000 demon soldiers to easily take over the entire city. And Yu lived like a prince in the battleship. As he closed his eyes to rest, he planned his next move. Because of Bay City's geographical advantage, he decided to use this city as his main camp and continue to expand towards the south. At the same time, he learned that Ji Tianxing had come to the 72 cities and was trying to stop his advance. He had to consider how to find Ji Tianxing and kill him as soon as possible. However, just as Yu was planning his next move, a glazed fire dragon barged into Bay City. 2 uninvited guests had slaughtered more than 1,000 demon warriors. Yu was alarmed and walked out of the battleship to check on the situation. Seeing that it was Ji Tianxing, Yu was pleasantly surprised. He did not expect that a cunning fellow like Ji Tianxing would walk right into his trap. Ji Tianxing looked up at Yu and sneered. "Yu, you wanted to work with North Underworld Mountain, but now that the ancestor Fiend Celestial has come out of seclusion, North Underworld Mountain has kicked you aside. How do you feel now? Are you very angry and humiliated?" He spoke in the demon language, so Yu naturally understood. However, Yu pretended not to understand and said with a gloomy expression, "Ji Tianxing, you are just making wild guesses. What a joke. I traverse the universe and am invincible. Why do I need to work with others?" Ji Tianxing laughed even more disdainfully and said in a mocking tone, "You don't have to pretend in front of me. If not for the failure of our cooperation and North Underworld Mountain no longer having a place for you, why would you be in a hurry to attack the 72 cities? Aren't you afraid of the ancestor Fiend Celestial's revenge, so you seized the 72 cities in advance to find a place to stay?" Yu's thoughts were exposed, but he couldn't refute. He was instantly enraged. He glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing and cried out in a deep voice, "Ji Tianxing, I'm too lazy to waste my breath on you. Whatever you say, I'll treat it as your last words." With that, Yu waved his hand and gave an order in the Heaven Punisher's language. Immediately, the 2 black-armored guards behind him turned into streaks of light and rushed toward Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. It wasn't just that. 4 black-armored guards flew out from the city governor's estate of Bay City, and they brandished their weapons as they charged over. Swish. Swish. A total of 6 black-armored guards attacked from different directions, slashing out sharp blades that covered the sky and earth, releasing monstrous ferocious might. The 6 of them joined forces and attacked together. Unexpectedly, they secretly combined the profoundness of the battle formation and released a formless soul-suppressing power. It was as if a huge mountain of 100,000 miles came crashing down. The glazed fire dragon found it hard to support itself. Its body swayed and almost fell from the sky. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's faces were also solemn. They hurriedly circulated their qi to resist the formless pressure. In the next moment, more than 100 crimson blades fell from the sky and were about to drown Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao flew into the sky and swung their swords to fight against the 6 black-armored guards. 7-star sword. Sky-seizing claw. Ji Tianxing's left palm struck out with a golden dragon claw that was as big as a mountain. He waved his sword in his right hand and shot out 49 rays of cold light. Long river of stars and moon. Yun Yao shouted softly. She waved her silver moon dual swords and slashed out hundreds of rays of starry sword light. The rays of sword light that filled the sky gathered together and formed a huge river of stars. It carried a mighty divine power and blasted toward the 6 black-armored guards. Bam, 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 bam. The starry sword light and dragon claw clashed with the crimson light in the sky. There was a deafening explosion that shook the sky. A violent shockwave spread out and swept across a few hundred miles. It swept across the sky above in Bay City. Suddenly, sand and stones flew around the city. Countless broken houses were turned into ruins on the spot. Even the surrounding stone walls were smashed into pieces by the shockwave and turned into debris. The two sides exchanged blows. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were unharmed. The 6 black-armored guards were thrown back more than 10 miles and they were panting heavily. The glazed fire dragon took the opportunity to fly away and leave the battlefield. It charged toward the demon tribe army near the city gate. It had not broken through to the martial sage realm and it was not suitable for it to interfere in the battle between the martial sages. Soon the 6 black-armored guards came back and formed a hexagram formation to attack Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing sneered. He immediately sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao and said, "These foreign tribesmen do not cultivate dermic powers. Instead they cultivate a kind of power that is similar to killing aura. They can release an invisible soul-suppressing power and increase their power through the formation. However, the hexagram formation is very common in the various worlds and is not difficult to break through. You and I only need to work together and change between Qian Dui Kuan and Li. Then we will have a chance to break through." As he spoke, Ji Tianxing used the mysterious Big Dipper steps. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and stabbed out dozens of cold radiances. Yun Yao immediately understood what he meant. She also used the mysterious steps and changed her position. At the same time she waved her 2 swords to attack. The 2 sides fought fiercely in the sky. The fight was very intense. Bang, 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 bang. The sword radiance and the crimson light collided and shattered at the same time. In an instant hundreds of millions of light fragments fell like a colorful rainstorm. In just 10 breaths the 2 sides had exchanged more than 20 blows. As expected, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao broke through the other party's formation. The 4 black-armored guards were severely injured and vomited blood. They were sent flying dozens of miles away. The 4 of them were in a miserable state. There were either ravines on their chests and backs and they were almost cut in half. Some of them were missing limbs. The other 2 black-armored guards were less injured, but they were also unable to form a formation. When Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao charged over, the 2 of them could only defend themselves tiredly and were forced to retreat. After 3 blows, the 2 of them were also sent flying. They vomited blood and let out shrill cries. At this point the 6 black-armored guards were severely injured. Even though the humans in Bay City were fleeing in all directions, they did not forget to watch the battle. After seeing Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao display their prowess, everyone was overjoyed. Their hearts were filled with desire and anticipation. And Yu had been standing on the battleship and watching the battle from above. Originally, with his status, he thought that he did not need to do anything. The 6 guards would be able to deal with Ji Tianxing and his wife. However, the result was the complete opposite. He lost all his dignity and was extremely furious. Scarlet flames surged in his eyes, and his entire body was emitting a towering killing intent. When he saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao chasing after him relentlessly and wanting to take the opportunity to kill the 6 black-armored guards, he could no longer sit still. "Ji Tianxing, I'm here. Don't be arrogant." Chapter 2292. Swoosh, swoosh. 2 blood-red sword beams that were thousands of feet long descended from the sky with a divine might that could destroy everything. At that moment the space within a 150-mile radius seemed to freeze. An invisible soul-suppressing power enveloped the entire Bay City. Before the sword beams arrived, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were already trembling from the suppressive force. Their eyes were solemn. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing pulled Yun Yao without hesitation and fled out of the city. We can't fight within you in the city. Otherwise, the shock waves from the battle will destroy the entire city. Ji Tianxing was here to save Anbei City. He didn't want to destroy the city and let hundreds of thousands of citizens die with it. Therefore, he chose to avoid the battle temporarily and used his teleportation secret technique to escape from Anbei City with Yun Yao. Rather than saying that he was escaping, it was more appropriate to say that he was moving the battlefield. Swoosh! A white light flashed. In the next moment, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao teleported 150 miles and appeared in the mountain range south of the city. And used two giant swords made of blood. Light missed their target. However, he was powerful. He reacted quickly and retracted his power. Swoosh! The giant swords formed by the blood-red light immediately dissipated. In the city below, the thousands of demon race cultivators all had looks of joy on their faces, as if they had just survived a calamity. Fortunately, Yu had retracted his sword beams. Otherwise they would have been killed. After all, Yu's goal was to occupy Anbei City, not destroy it. Swoosh! With a flash of blood-red light, Yu teleported 150 miles and appeared in the mountain range south of the city. At that moment, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao flew across the sky together and escaped south for another few dozen miles. Yu stared at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's backs and revealed a bloodthirsty grin. He shouted angrily, "Isn't it too late to run now?" As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his left hand and shot out two dark red balls of blood-red light. Swoosh! The two balls of blood-red light immediately transformed into two gigantic palms that blotted out the sky. They descended from the sky and slammed toward Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Although they were 50 miles apart, the two gigantic palms appeared above Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's heads. To a martial god powerhouse like Yu, he could easily control the world within a 500-mile radius. With a thought, he could cast a spell to kill a powerful enemy from a 500-mile distance. This was the ability of a martial god powerhouse. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao could only use their swords to stab the gigantic palms in the sky. Fortunately, they were already outside Anbei City. Both of them didn't dare to unleash their full strength, had no worries of their own. Sword. Meteor assault. Ji Tianxing unleashed 100% of his power. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and stabbed it toward the gigantic palms in the sky. Yun Yao held the silver moon dual swords tightly and combined them into one. She stabbed out a gigantic starry sword that went against the sky and stabbed toward the other gigantic palms. Boom! Two deafening sounds exploded almost at the same time and resounded through the world. A mushroom-like starlight exploded from the gigantic palms on the left and blasted the gigantic palms into pieces. The gigantic starry sword blasted a huge hole in the gigantic palms on the right. Both palms exploded at the same time. The starlight and blood-red light shards that blotted out the sky rained down like torrential rain, enveloping a 200-mile radius. The shockwaves spread out and razed the surrounding mountains to the ground, stirring up clouds of dust. Seizing the opportunity, Yu rushed to Ji Tianxing's side in a flash and slashed with his sword. Swoosh! 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 36 blood-red sword rays pierced toward Ji Tianxing's vital points at lightning speed. They were aimed at his glabella, chest, dantian and other parts of his body. At such a close distance, Ji Tianxing couldn't dodge them. He could only block them with his sword. Swoosh! 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 In that instant he swung his sword 42 times to block the blood-red sword rays. Clang! 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 The two swords clashed fiercely. Ji Tianxing was sent flying by the violent impact. The sword of burial of heaven in his hand buzzed non-stop. After he retreated for 30 miles, he finally neutralized the impact. Burial of heaven's voice rang in his head. Damn it! That guy's sword is a divine weapon. We can't fight him head-on. Otherwise I might shatter. The sword of burial of heaven's tone was angry and unwilling. It was once a famous king-grade divine sword. Now it had fallen to such a state where it could not even block a void god-grade divine sword. This was a disgrace and a tragedy. Understood. Ji Tianxing didn't say much. He responded with 3 words and used his ultimate move without hesitation. Celestial Dragon Body. He shouted. His body lit up with a golden light that shot up into the sky. His body suddenly expanded. After the golden light faded, he turned into a 100 feet tall golden-armored god of war. His combat strength had increased by more than 6 times. His combat strength was close to that of a divine weapon. So what if you've grown bigger? You'll only die faster. And Yu laughed arrogantly and swung his sword at Qin Xiaobei again. The Heaven Punishers were the best at close combat. Their combat strength was no weaker than that of the Dragon Tribe. Ji Tianxing knew that Yu was powerful. He didn't want to fight him head-on. He swung his sword and used his ultimate move. God-slaying sword. He held the Heaven Barrier sword with both hands and slashed out a giant golden sword with all his might. It slashed toward Yu with boundless divine might. Yu didn't care about him at all. He swung his sword and swung it at Qin Xiaobei. Bam, bam, bam. Yu immediately let out a muffled groan and flew back with a pale face. His eyes widened in astonishment, revealing a look of disbelief. He couldn't believe that Ji Tianxing, who was so weak 2 months ago, had become so powerful today. He was close to the martial god realm and could break through his defense. At that moment Yunyao appeared out of nowhere. She swung her swords at Yu. Meteor destruction. Following her angry roar, 2 meteor-like light blades cut across the sky and slashed at Yu. Bam. Yu's body shook. 2 bloody grooves appeared on his back and blood spurted out. The incomparably powerful impact caused him to fly out at an even faster speed. Damn you B*TC. How could you hurt me? Yu was shocked and enraged. The fire in his eyes burned brighter. Ji Tianxing's strength had increased by more than 10 times. Even Yunyao's strength had increased by more than 10 times in 2 months. It was a miracle. Yu could not believe what he had seen. While he was in a daze, Ji Tianxing and Yunyao attacked him again. The husband and wife were in sync. They swung their swords from both sides and attacked Yu from both sides. The sword radiance shrouded Yu's body. With the help of the battle formation, their strength was increased by 3 times. Yu snapped out of his daze and shouted with both shame and anger, "You pair of reptiles, I was just careless, that's why I was hurt by you. Do you think you have the right to fight me? Dream on." Chapter 2293. Following a crisp cracking sound, 2 huge cracks appeared in the sky, forming the shape of a cross. From the pitch-black spatial cracks, a terrifying spatial storm surged towards Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. The huge blood-red cross-shaped slash locked onto their divine souls and exploded with a destructive power. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing and Yunyao joined forces to counterattack. Sky-splitting sword. Galaxy ribbon. Both of them exerted all of their power and sent out a sword beam and a river of stars towards the sky. Amidst the deafening noise, the 1,000-foot giant sword and galaxy ribbon collided with the blood-red cross-shaped slash. Both of them collapsed at the same time, splashing out brilliance that blotted out the sky. There was a bright golden light, a dazzling silver light, and a dark red blood-red light. The destructive shockwave spread out in all directions along with 3 different colored fragments of light. Instantly, the sky and earth within a 300-mile radius were filled with colorful lights. However, Ji Tianxing and Yunyao were also sent flying by the powerful shockwave. Both of them were sent flying for 20 miles before the shockwave dissipated. They stopped steadily in the sky and panted with pale faces. Although both of them were not injured, their dermic powers were a little chaotic and sluggish. Their divine souls were also suppressed by an invisible force and their consciousness was a little blurry. Right at this moment, Yu rushed over again. He swung his sword and slashed out a few sword lights towards Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. Both of them were suddenly awakened and quickly used their swords to block the attack. Bam, bam. Another series of muffled sounds exploded and both of them were sent flying again. They crashed into the ruins not far away and kicked up a cloud of dust. This time both of them were slightly injured and there was blood at the corner of their mouths. Yu's target was clear. He ignored Yunyao and charged towards Ji Tianxing with his sword again. Swoosh. 4 dark red sword lights, carrying the power to cut through everything, fell from the sky and slashed towards Ji Tianxing. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing hurriedly used the armillary sphere secret technique and disappeared. He merged with heaven and earth and easily dodged the sword light. Bang 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 bang. The blood-red sword light slashed down on the ground, creating a few deep ravines in the ground. Dust and smoke rose into the air. The ground within 100 miles began to tremble and many cracks appeared. Where did he hide? When An Yu saw Ji Tianxing disappear, he immediately frowned and released his divine sense to explore the surroundings. He could clearly sense Ji Tianxing's aura, but he just couldn't find where Ji Tianxing was. After 2 short breaths, he understood the situation and sneered. Hehehe. This brat actually grasped such an exquisite secret technique that allowed him to become one with the heaven and earth within 800 miles? Don't tell me that you think I can't do anything to you just because of this? An Yu's eyes flashed with contempt and he turned to attack Yun Yao. Sky Sea Sword. He shouted in a low voice, and with a wave of his sword, a dark red sword light that was hundreds of feet long slashed towards Yun Yao. Yun Yao hurriedly retreated to dodge, but the sword light was too fast and she couldn't dodge it at all. She had no choice but to wave her silver moon dual swords, and slashed out 6 starry sword lights to block An Yu's attack. Another series of muffled bangs sounded, and Yun Yao was pushed back another 15 miles. An Yu chased after her relentlessly and he swung his sword again, creating a sky full of blood light. He swore to kill Yun Yao on the spot. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing could only show himself and join forces with Yun Yao to block An Yu. The two of them worked together and fought fiercely with An Yu, and their figures kept flickering in the sky. Both of them kept changing their positions, and the battlefield was also moving quickly, getting further and further away from An Bei City. Everywhere they passed, the sky was filled with sword lights, and the mountains and rivers were razed to the ground, and the ground was slashed into ruins. The ground within 1,000 miles was filled with ravines and deep pits, and it was a messy scene. The sky was also filled with dust that didn't disperse for a long time. Rumble. Loud sounds reverberated in the sky as if muffled thunders were rumbling. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Both of them had exchanged tens of thousands of blows, and they had moved 6,000 miles and were fighting in a mountain range. At this moment, An Yu was already covered in wounds. More than 20 sword wounds were clearly visible and blood kept flowing out of them. He looked a little wretched, but he was still full of divine power, and it wouldn't be a problem for him to fight for a few more hours. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were not only covered in wounds and blood, but they had also used up more than half of their dermic powers and their strength was weakening. Fortunately, although the two of them were heavily injured, they weren't fatal and they didn't lose any limbs. However, An Yu had the upper hand and the two of them gradually switched from attacking to defending. In the end, they could only defend themselves with exhaustion. The situation was getting worse, and Ji Tianxing's expression became more and more serious. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao. It's a pity that we can't kill him even if we work together. After all, he is a martial god and his divine power is endless. We can't outlast him at all. Yun Yao was also aware of it and she replied, although we can't kill him, we are not defeated. It's enough that we can fight against him for so long. When we increase our cultivation by 2 or 3 levels, we are confident that we can defeat him. The only thing we can do now is to retreat from this place and then we can come up with a countermeasure. Okay. Ji Tianxing agreed to her suggestion, and he retreated while blocking An Yu's attacks. The two of them retreated as they fought and they accelerated towards the south. An Yu wanted to kill them, so how could he let Ji Tianxing go? He had been chasing them for 2 hours and he had traveled more than 30,000 miles, but he still couldn't kill Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's situation was getting more and more dangerous, and their powers were getting weaker. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing could only use his secret skill, and he waved his palm to create a raging golden flame. God-slaying spear. The raging golden flame formed a 200-foot-long golden divine spear, and it pierced toward An Yu with a destructive force. An Yu could feel the terrifying power of the golden divine spear, and it was enough to pierce through his defense. He was instantly on guard and he quickly cast a spell to defend himself. Zhoosh, zhoosh. Not only did he release a red light shield to protect himself, but he also slashed out dozens of sword radiances with his sword. Bam, 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 bam. In the deafening noise, the god-slaying spear shattered the sword radiances in the sky, and it pierced through his protective light shield. Crack. The dark red light shield shattered into billions of pieces. The powerful impact also sent Yu flying dozens of miles away. The god-slaying spear brushed past his left shoulder, leaving behind a wound so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood splattered everywhere and an excruciating pain assaulted him. Yu's expression changed and he couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. After a while he finally got rid of the impact and he stopped in the sky. Only then did he realize that there was no one in front of him. Tianxia and Yunyao had already teleported away. Even when he released his divine sense to cover an area of 1,000 miles, he couldn't find Tianxia and Yunyao. Damn it! Chapter 2294. The night was dark and the cold wind howled. In an ordinary mountain peak in a mountain range thousands of miles away from Tong'an City, Tianxia dug a temporary cave and set up a defensive formation. This cave became their temporary shelter. After escaping Yu's pursuit, the two of them came here and hid in the cave to recuperate. Although the two of them were covered in wounds and blood and looked rather miserable, their injuries were not serious. But in reality his injuries weren't too serious. He would recover after some treatment. However, the two of them had used up too much of their dermic powers and were physically and mentally exhausted. They needed to cultivate for 2 days to recover. The cave was as dark as ink and silent. Tianxia and Yunyao sat opposite each other. Their hands formed a seal and placed on their knees. They were circulating their dermic powers with their eyes closed. Their bodies were glowing with a faint silver light, and there was a majestic dermic power fluctuation. Unknowingly 2 days had passed. The two of them had consumed pills to heal their injuries and recover their dermic powers. After 2 days and 2 nights of cultivation they finally recovered to their peak state. The wounds on their bodies had also healed. After cleaning the blood stains and tidying up their hair and clothes, they were no different from before. Only then did the two of them calm down to discuss countermeasures. Yunyao said with a solemn expression, "We can't defeat Yu, so we can't save Bay City. We can't fight him head-on either. We can only think of other ways." Tianxia nodded and said, "We just don't have to fight him head-on. He can't do anything to us. Anyway, he has conquered so many cities. He has to leave a few foreign race guards in each city. We'll go rescue them one by one and kill those foreign race guards in the Devil Race Army. Then we can cut off his wings. In the end, all the foreign race guards and the Devil Race Army under him will be killed and he will be alone. He won't be able to invade the 72 cities." Yunyao thought for a moment and continued, "I wonder if Yu is in Bay City now? Will he use Bay City as a place to stay?" Tianxia frowned and thought for a moment. He immediately had an idea. "Don't worry. Let's go to the nearby Tong'an City. We should be able to get some information. Also, I plan to find the city lord of Tong'an City and ask him to help us." Yunyao looked puzzled and asked, "How can Governor Tong'an help us?" Tianxia explained, "Next we need to save the cities and assassinate those non-humankind guards. We also need to avoid meeting Yu. If that was the case he would need to know the movements of the demon army and Yu. But we don't have the time to ask around. This kind of thing can only be left to the city lords of the various cities." Yunyao came to a sudden realization and quickly nodded in agreement. "Yes, that's true." Every city lord had many scouts and heralds under their command, so they could quickly gather information. "You saved Red Rock City and Tong'an City. As long as you ask for their help they will definitely agree." Tianxia smiled and said, "Then let's not waste any more time. Let's set off as soon as possible." Then the two of them left the cave and flew toward Tong'an City. An hour later Tianxia and Yunyao arrived at Tong'an City. The two of them waited for a while in the city lord's residence before meeting the city lord. Previously, Tianxia saved Tong'an City but left without leaving his name. The city lord of Tong'an City and many nobles felt that it was a pity. In the past 2 days, the city lord had been busy dealing with the aftermath, treating the injured and rebuilding his home. When he heard that Tianxia had arrived, he was overjoyed and came to greet him without hesitation. Tianxia exchanged some pleasantries with him and told him the purpose of his visit. The city lord of Tong'an City agreed on the spot without hesitation. He even promised that he would deliver the news accurately and on time. Other than that, the city lord also expressed his respect and gratitude for Tianxia's actions in saving the various cities. Ji Tianxing asked the city lord about the situation in Anbei city. The city lord's expression turned solemn as he shook his head and sighed. He told Ji Tianxing that Anbei city had been completely occupied by the demon race's army and that there was a black flying ship in the sky above the city. In addition, in the past 2 days, another 3 cities had been attacked, and all of them had already fallen. Ji Tianxing understood the moment he heard that. And Yu had indeed treated Anbei city as his base and was even expanding outwards. The two of them talked about the situation in the 72 cities and mentioned Red Rock City. Ji Tianxing took the opportunity to ask the city lord of Tong and city to send a message to the city lord of Red Rock City to ask for help. The city lord of Tong and city did as he was told and immediately sent a message to the city lord of Red Rock City. Not long after, the city lord of Red Rock City replied and agreed without hesitation. With that, the scouts from the 2 cities would help Ji Tianxing to gather information for him. Only then was he relieved. After bidding farewell to the city lord of Tong and city, he left with Yun Yao. The two of them rode the glass fire dragon and flew towards the northeast. About 2 hours later, the glazed fire dragon arrived near a city. This city was close to Tong and city and Anbei city. The 3 cities were in a tripartite state and their strengths were similar. However, this ancient city had already been occupied by the demon race army. Ji Tianxing checked outside the city for a while and found out that there were 30,000 demon race soldiers in the city. They were scattered all over the city and were guarding the city gates and the important roads. Furthermore, there were 4 martial sage realm foreign race guards in the city lord's mansion. Hence, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao sneaked into the city and secretly headed to the city lord's mansion to assassinate the few foreign race guards. The glass fire dragon searched for traces of the demon race in the city and quickly killed the demon race army. Soon a huge battle broke out. The glass fire dragon soared in the night sky and its body was surrounded by flames, lighting up half of the city. It sprinkled flames all over the sky and released a destructive attack that quickly killed the demon race army. The earth-shattering battle immediately alerted many of the demon race and the human race martial artists who were trapped in the city. Along with the loud rumbling sounds, there were shouts and cries for help from the people in the city. After a while, a huge battle broke out in the city lord's mansion. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao launched a surprise attack and severely injured 2 of the foreign race guards. The other 2 foreign race guards rushed over to save them and immediately joined the battle to besiege Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. The battle between the martial sages caused a huge commotion. It could be said to be earth-shattering and the sound shook the clouds. The aftermath of the violent and devastating battle shattered the already dilapidated city lord's mansion on the spot. Not only did the house collapse into ruins, but the ground also collapsed into a deep pit and dust flew up into the air. Luckily, the battle only lasted for 100 breaths of time before it ended. The 4 foreign race guards were no match for Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Both sides only exchanged more than 10 blows and the 4 foreign race guards were killed on the spot. They died without a complete corpse. After the couple dealt with the foreign race guards, they searched for the demon race army in the city and started a massacre. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.